Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Master Random, the podcast. I am your host, Boo Atta, and this is another episode of 2021. Not as many episodes as I've wanted to do. I actually have, and as you heard in a previous episode, and possibly in the first Master Random Journals episode, things are changing in my life. A lot of things going on. So February, March were just crazy madness for me. And now in April, I have my little baby boy was born, and you know what comes with that, right? Time gets taken away from the things that you want to do, and all the focus goes to this little beautiful baby boy. And so now I have the simple bare bones setup with the podcast. We're actually in two different places. We have a foot in Agana, where the podcast studio was and where I was living. And now we're moving into a new place. And, it's just been so hard to just sit down and do podcasts, invite people to do podcasts. So the Master Random Journals is something that I plan on focusing on more. I do have a few episodes waiting in the wind to release, but I wanted to release this episode first. My next guest on this show is Dr. Jordan Tingson. I actually had to ask him at the end of the show how to correctly pronounce his name, and Tingson is it. He is a doctor in physical therapy, specializing in athletic recovery and sports conditioning. He does work over at SOAR. They are sports, orthopedic, and active rehabilitation physical therapy in Tamuning. And he just became a part of the Guam men's national basketball team as a physical therapist. So this guy's got a lot going on for him. He's young, he's driven, he's passionate, and to top all that, you think that's it? And this guy is extremely smart. You listen to this podcast episode, this guy has so much to say, and I kind of feel bad it took me so long to drop this episode, but what he says is it'll never go brown. It'll always stay green. And I look forward to having this guy back on the podcast in the future. Once, of course, the podcast studio is all set up and stuff. It'll probably be another 3 to 4 months. You want things to move faster than they really are, but really sometimes you just have to let the universe take its course, do its own thing, let it flow. And that's all I've been doing. And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to take my stuff from Agana. I'm going to bring it up to the new place, set it up as bare bones as I can so that I can at least do this and drop this killer episode with Dr. Jordan Tingson. Check it out, everyone.
On Guam, it's like we're so small, so it's always like the first person to ever come up with something is like they always know, like, oh yeah, you're that guy, you did this. Oh yeah, that person, you did that, right? And so like with how much the internet has grown and how much like connectivity has grown throughout the world, you kind of see like the rapid rate at which like now things have been developing in terms of social trends here. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like cool because I remember like being in high school and then like Master Random like kind of being a thing, and I was like, oh, what's that? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know, but it's cool. And there's a podcast, or not in high school, like in college, but I just remember.
I was gonna say, I was like, wait, how old are you?
Yeah. No, because I first saw it like on Twitter. And then like, I just started seeing it and I was like, Master Random podcast. Like, oh, okay. We got someone doing a podcast now. Like, that's pretty cool. So, it's like, and then I just see you grow, and then I see different things. Like even like, I listened to the podcast episode on Kick the Fat, and you were like interviewing everyone.
Yeah.
And
I just thought, a live episode. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was like pretty cool. And I was trying to listen to Derek. I was trying to listen to your interview with Derek because he's my cousin. So okay. I was like, oh, I want to hear Derek talk on public radio. And then he's like, oh yeah, I won and I only slept like for 4 hours. And I was like trying to battle it out with Ryan, and he's like so technical about it. And I'm just listening. I'm like, man, how this dude come out here, like, sleep only 4 hours, goes out, runs a 10K like that. And I'm like, this guy got back into running. Like, he retired, he stopped running competitively for a while, went back to Pacific Games, started running competitively and doing more marathons. He has a kid, and we were kind of just like, oh, okay, I think he's done. And now it's like, he's still going. And I'm just like, man, that level of dedication is just like, it's different. And it's like, you really take a look at, the level of commitment and dedication that he has, and not even just like his successes, because it's very easy for individuals to kind of look at others, right?
Right.
And take a look only at their successes. But oftentimes, like, they disregard the failures. Like, the failures aren't shown. I'm just like, so because, like, I know him personally, like, I know, like, some of the times where, like, he didn't come out on top. And I know, like, the stories of, how he had to work to get where he was at. And, like, for me, hearing that, as a little kid, and him and his brother were, like, two people that I looked up to, that I was close to, like, that was something for me where it was like,
and consistently at the top of their game. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, and Desmond comes back, and then he took over Ukudu in track and field for high school my senior year. And the first thing I could think of was, oh shit, now we got to worry about them. So, like, I did track and field in high school, and, like, I did track and field in high school, and I was like one of the projected to be, like, one of the top runners in my events, right? And so, granted, like, overall, back in my time, we weren't running as fast as some of the other individuals were now.
Right.
But it was like, we saw Ukudu, and it was like, okay, they have a big talent pool, but we're like, okay, they don't really have it together yet. There's still a new program, right? Things haven't really fallen into place. And then Desmond goes there, and his first year he goes and he gets like a third place trophy for the boys. And then, like, every year he was there, he's always bringing back trophies, for that school. And I just saw that, and I'm just like, damn, I got to worry about them. Yeah. And then you got Derek, who's still competing and running with all those athletes. So for me, that, like, just set a foundation for, like, okay, there's a certain level of commitment to achieve certain goals, right?
Right. To preface, we were talking about, just having passion and love for something. We just opened. So, and how your relation to the Mandel brothers, right? They have shown you that this sort of passion, it does have ups and downs. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not something that can be sustained for, like, a long period of time. And even at that, it's like, the individuals who can sustain it for a long period of times, they're not the ones that make it pro. They're the ones that stay pro. They're the ones that go and win multiple championships and are multiple all-stars, right?
Yeah.
Because you think about, like, okay, that's one person. I'm like, okay, that's one person out of 15 on one team, out of 30 teams, out of, how many players entered out of how many leagues, right? Out of how many people went into college. And it's like...
And how many kids play high school and didn't make it,
exactly,
and middle school and elementary, right?
Yeah, and so you look at, like, the statistics of, how many kids actually make it into D1 sports, or to even college sports for that matter, out of, like, the percentages of participants in youth community leagues, or just even, like, starting up, right? And that number gets smaller and smaller, and you have to think, like, okay, that means that it's competitive. I'm like, it's not competitive in the sense that, it's not just competitive in the sense that, like, you are stacked up against the competition. It's competitive because you're competing against yourself.
Yeah, man, the body, like, you're trying to push the body to these peak maximum potential.
Exactly.
Right? And look at all these, look at the stars, look at LeBron, right? How much it costs for him to take care of his body every year. It's like $1 million a year, right? And just upkeep and care. And he still has to ice his knees and shoulders after every game, you know?
Yeah. And so, like, I'm gonna bring the clock back in his days in Miami, and, like, kind of second round in Cleveland, his second debut in Cleveland, where it was like, you would notice that, oh, he's taking a few games off, he's doing that, he's like, he's resting. Why is he resting? He shouldn't have to be resting. I'm like, he can play now because he said back then, I need to rest.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's one of the things that's crazy about the level that you get to. Like, when you get to that level, you have to accept that there are some days where you have to rest, right? And it's extremely hard to grasp that concept when working hard every single day got you there. So, like, even, like, for myself, and I know for a bunch of other individuals, like, I was always, studying every day. I was reading every day, trying to work out every day, right? I finally got into PT school, and then like, I'm there. This was my goal, and I'm trying to keep up that same momentum. And I hit burnout, like in the middle of the program for something that made me do what I want to do and
what
like,
you love.
Yeah, what I love, and like, gave me this passion, for like helping people, right? It was in that moment where I just felt like I nearly didn't want to do it anymore.
What happened? What were the events leading up to the burnout? Because typically it's almost like an overdrive of something happening in someone's life, right? To cause you to not want to do the thing that you love the most anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Definitely like a few things. So one was just overall workload. I was like, how like, in college or like in school, there are like certain classes or certain periods like, oh, this one's going to be really hard. Like, okay, this semester is going to be easy.
So is PT school like a grad program?
So it's a grad program. Okay. So it's a grad program. It's not a master's. So a master's is specific to academia world.
Okay.
Now, physical therapy programs are now all doctor of physical therapy programs, where it basically has the similar content of a master's program, except that with the DPT program, it's more of a clinical degree. So similar to that of an MD, right? Or a nurse practitioner, which is like the graduate level. That was the first
thing that came to my head.
Yeah. So because in the States, and what they're really pushing for is that they're trying to tear down barriers for primary care providers, right? And so in certain states, physical therapists are have direct access to patient care, meaning that they don't need a referral. So it's like, my shoulder hurts. I don't have to go to a doctor. I can go straight to a physical therapist, similar to how that can work with some chiropractors, right? So it's kind of like, it's tearing down barriers to care. And so the clinical education that we received, right, in addition to just understanding like all the usual and traditional didactic, which would be necessary for like a medical program or for the traditional physical therapy program back then, which was a master's. Now we have to recognize certain things like red flags, know when to refer out, and basically become like a very, like in a sense, a doctor of some sort, right? Like if someone comes into the clinic, right?
So you have to have general knowledge of everything that's going on.
Exactly. And the thing is that like you have to have a very strong pharmacology and pathology base, because it's like if someone comes into the clinic and they're coming in with shoulder pain, right? Yeah. First thing I have to think of is like, okay, how do I know this person's not having a heart attack? Like, you know what I mean? Or if it's like someone's having a headache, like, okay, how do I know this person, doesn't have something underlying going on? Or if someone comes in with back pain, like, okay, how do I know they don't have a real emergency going on? You know what I mean? Because I have to be able to recognize that and know when to refer out, because that's the expectation upon graduation. And that's not even just learning how to like treat people, you know what I mean? Right. Like, so there was just a large amount of information and critical thinking that I thought I was good at, but you go out there and you get pushed, right? And
how long is the school?
So most programs are 3 years in length, with 2 years of didactic information and then 1 year of clinical experience.
Matt, can you Google didactic for us, please? I don't know what didactic means.
Sorry, I'm on autopilot right now.
Dude, hey man, you're making this easy. Yeah. I love it, dude.
Yeah. So
go ahead, Matt. One more time. What does it mean?
Intended to teach, particularly in having moral instruction and ulterior motive.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's you have to leave physical therapy.
It's like ethics then.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
There's a lot of ethics, but even at that, it's like you have to know everything. Like, I want to work with athletes. I want to work with the orthopedic population, right? But I also have to learn how to work with geriatric patients, how to do cardiovascular rehab, how to do pediatric
rehab. Disability patients too?
Dude, so any impairments where an individual, right, has, maybe not the same resources or mobility or access to things as others, right? Yeah. We have to kind of tear down those barriers. So it really, what I like and how I frame a lot of what I work with is that, like, yes, like you can use the word, right, like disabled, but I like to use the word preferably impaired, mostly because just, words are associated with specific stereotypes, and then certain individuals, like that affects their belief system, overall affects their morale. So,
societal changes in norms, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if like someone's being okay with call with that, then we can use that kind of language. But I try to open up with one that kind of keeps them guessing, and it's just like kind of, huh? So then that way they don't buy into what they think they already know. So I always try to offer a different perspective. So yeah,
that's very smart. Yeah. It's like laying you down softly.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's really just a lot of information that really kind of tore me down, like bit by bit. Like I just couldn't sustain the pace that I was going at to succeed at a high level. You know what I mean? Like I'm talking like, you know, like when you hear the stories of like people who are straight A students and they go to med school, then they get to med school.
Man, I took a class one time in college, and people were like on chapter 4 already, right, of the whole thing, and I was like, this is the first day of class. What are you talking about?
Exactly. So
like, how are you this smart?
Yeah. So like, you know, I was one of those guys. I had all that energy. I wanted to read. I wanted to do that. And like, it broke me down because I just could not sustain that pace. Like,
did you have a social life?
I had a social life, but even at that, like my social life became more of like less enjoyable and became more of a coping mechanism to where I was doing things that were unhealthy to my body and unhealthy, you know, to like just my mental health as well.
For sure.
And like it just, you know, things compounded, and just like on top of like different you know, different losses that occurred being off island and not being able to fly home for like funerals or be with family, right? Missing different events, right? It was just very stressful, and the overall like load, for lack of a better term, that was placed on me, right, just wore me down bit by bit to a point where there were times where I'm just trying to get by. I'm trying to survive.
Good with the D.
Yeah, exactly.
Good with the C.
And then you get a letter at the end of the semester saying that we noticed that your GPA is this. You are placed on what's that called? This
Academic
is a warning.
Probation.
Exactly. Because like, you know, I didn't know that the school that I was going to was a private school. Like when I first applied, they were the first school to accept me. I was like, you know, it's kind of just like, oh, okay, all right, I'm in. Like, why am I gonna try any harder? And then like everyone's saying all these good things about this school, and they're like saying like, oh my gosh, I tried so hard to get in there, like I didn't get it. I'm so upset, and I'm just like, oh, I got in. And, you know, so I was like, for me, I just didn't realize like I didn't realize where they sat on the totem pole in terms of like
prestige.
You know, prestige, and how well their program was. And so like I didn't understand like it was that level, because you know I was like 21 when I graduated college, right? Turned 22 in PT school. Like I'm young and I'm ready to to go and everything, right? Like I want to experience the world. And then the environment I was in was just extremely professional. It was like, it was so bad. I was so unaware of it that I did not want to wear a suit to my interview. It was a group interview, and like they were like, my mom's telling me, you got to wear a suit. Like, why am I going to wear a suit? I'm just going to dress up, maybe wear a button down, maybe wear a tie. And like, no, Jordan, you got to wear a suit. My cousin's with me because he stays out in DC, so I'm with him. Man, that guy.
Where's his school at, or what school did you go to?
So I went to George Washington University, out in DC. So, and I'm just like, it's DC. Like I've been there before. Like it's chill. We're good. I didn't understand the culture there, and so I was so underprepared for the magnitude of prestigiousness that school had that I didn't want to wear a suit to the interview.
Dude, people wear suits and ties to the office that I worked at out in DC. I stayed out there for 2 months, and here on Guam, the same organization, it's like chill, button down, you know, island style, but out there, automatic tie, long sleeve shirt,
exactly,
you know, sport jacket, right, or sport coat, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I walk into the interview with the suit, uncomfortable. I hate wearing suits. I hated at the time. Now that I understand the fashion for it, I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of like suits now. But like, you know, like I was like, I hate suits. I know. I hated suits. I hated dress shoes. And then I walk in and I see everyone in like dress shoes and like just suited up. And there were like some people there. Like it was a group interview, so there was like 50 of us in the interview at the time. And like people were saying where they're from and everything. This one dude was like, I was on the USA National Ballet team. Another dude was like a football player for Penn State, and just all these other people. I'm like,
yeah, man, good on you, dude. That's awesome,
dude.
You know what I mean?
But so it opened up a few things for me. Like that one is that like when people say they want to do something, there are a bunch of other people who have better resumes than you that probably want to go and do the same thing. But that don't mean shit until the job actually gets done. So like I coach right now, and I always tell people, like, work's got to get done, and they're just like, they could always say like they're tired, this is going on, that's going on. I'm just like, all right, and I'm like, I just look at them like, don't change the work that got to get done.
Yeah. At your school, was it a lot of practice mixed with study, or is the burnout mostly study, or is it just connecting practice and principle?
It was I would honestly say it was mostly just the studying portion, because we had classes were like 4 hours long. You get like 2 hours of lecture, you get like 2 hours, 2 hours of lab. Dude, there was points in time where like everybody had a project or a presentation due for at least one class each week. Exam weeks got like, really tough, and it was just like a lot of pressure, and the anxiety that comes with it is just, it just takes that psychological toll on you. Like,
for sure.
Like when it comes to exam week, and it's just like one exam after the other, you're cramming, you're low on sleep, right?
I mean, dude, I struggled through college, to do what I do. I can't even imagine going through a master's program. I watched my girlfriend go through her master's program. I seen how stressful those things are, but on the medical side, can't even fathom. Dude, hey, Matt, can you grab my phone there? Yeah.
And so the crazy thing is about it is that like when you reach that higher level education, a lot of it isn't even necessarily remembering and recalling information. A lot of it is like the critical thinking aspect and putting things together. And like one of my colleagues on social media, like he's also a physical therapist, like he was discussing, there was this one article about critically thinking about critical thinking, right? Like, is this a skill that can actually be attained, right? Is it a thing that can actually be practiced, or is it something that you have or something that you don't have, right? And it's like, what is critical thinking even at that point, right? It's you got to piece together information, and it's like the thing is about critical thinking is that there's no like right answer. You're just always thinking. So it's like every time you think you know something, professors always hit you with, okay, could be, but what else?
Isn't it crazy how in the elementary books, the critical thinking part was the hardest part?
Yeah.
It almost seems impossible. I kind of want to go back to those books and see if they were actually that hard.
Yeah.
Or impossible.
Yeah.
Or our brains are just not evolved enough to like think in that way, right?
And that's where, that's another argument that comes up, is that like, is this necessarily a skill? Because, when you think about things,
I think so.
Exactly. And when you think about skills, like what happens with skill? Skills are developed over time through performance and through trials, right?
Polished and sharpened.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're going to have trials that are successful, and you're going to have trials that are unsuccessful, right? Now, the tricky part about critical thinking, how do you know if the trial is successful or unsuccessful in a gray world? You know what I mean?
Good point.
So that's where it becomes like so tricky, because like, okay, I think I got it right. Okay, how do you know? Well, you got this. I'm like, okay, but did you think about that? Like, no, I didn't. Okay, so how do you really know? Like, I don't know. I'm gonna test this. Does it really test that? Like, there's it gets.
What are your knowns? And how many unknowns do you have? Are you sure that's all your unknowns?
Exactly, right? And it's just it gets so piled up, and it's like, oh, well, this thing is there. Like, okay, does that have a role in it? Like, yes, it could, because of this, because of that, right? XYZ, you're trying to link pieces of information together.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you're just there and you listen to yourself talk, and you're just like, no, I'm totally reaching with this. You're just like, there's a
shouldn't have did those mushrooms.
Dude, it's like the level of stress that comes with like, having to find the word that we used was appropriate, to find an appropriate solution where everything seems right or everything seems wrong, just kind of just like beats down on you.
At the end of the day, did it all make sense though as to why you were going through those exercises, so to speak?
Yes, it makes sense at the end of the day, but not that day.
Yeah, of course.
It makes sense later down the line.
And it never does, dude. I'm in my career now, and I run into moments where it's like, okay, why do we do this?
Mm-hmm.
And then you realize that the exercise you're doing is for is going to compound to something much bigger as to the end result, right? The end goal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's just like crazy. And I'm not saying that like my situation is unique. I mean, shit, other people have gone through it too, man. Like there's just so much expectations and from other people and like from ourselves. And when those expectations aren't met, it becomes a clash of reality to where like what you thought was is no longer is. So now you're just kind of just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
You're just kind of like in this lost zone. And for me, like that's where I really struggled. And, you know, thankfully I found mentors and people, you know, that I could align with. I had good colleagues and friends and supportive professors, you know, that really helped me kind of navigate everything that was going on. Right. And the important thing wasn't to be successful that day. The whole point was to have a successful career. And I feel like, you know, like all with things, you know, developing the way they are now, where I'm at now in life and everything I got going for me, I really feel like, you know, it was those struggles that like really helped me get here. And like as cliche as it is, but it's like, that's why it's like, I always like when I coach or when I work with individuals, like, you know, that don't have exactly, you know, they're dealing with a lot of stuff, right? The most important thing I try to do is I just try to be there for them, just try to keep reminding them like, hey, it's going to be all right. Like you're getting there one day at a time. Right. And sometimes some days are better than others. Some days are slower than others. Some people have, you know, less shit going on than others, but it's like, the important thing is that like, you know, you just kind of have to keep waiting and keep them like, you know, keep working with them until the opportunity arises, because, you know, like you have breakthroughs sometimes. The thing is, you just got to stick around long enough to have the breakthrough.
Yeah. You got to go through the trials and the tribulations. I told you right before this podcast, I like have all kinds of shit going on in my life that's moving, all kinds of moving parts at one time. And previously, I'm someone who takes things piecemeal, you know, and just kind of rolls with it. But now I'm like balancing these 10 different things going on. And if I was 10 years younger, I'd falter, man. You know, I'd break down.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I think the maturity and the age and maybe the little bit of wisdom that I've gained over the years, it's helped in being able to make it more manageable, right? And be that mthat's of your life. There's some people that just let their lives just unwind and just be like, you know what, forget it. That's the way it should be. It's like not necessarily, right? I mean, maybe some things, but not all things have to be that way, right? And just being able to balance it all. And Jason J said it best on the show is I was like, how do you maintain, or how do you find balance? He goes, I don't find balance. I'm constantly maintaining it, maintaining balance. Yeah. As long as you're paying attention to your balance, everything should, you know, weigh itself as appropriately, right? Whether you have a few heavy stuff over here and 10 light stuff over here, it's, it's up to you how you want to move it around, right? Your space.
Yeah, man. Hey, dude. And in all honesty, I think like, just the way that life and like the world is and whatever powers are operating on it is just kind of like things will always work out like one way or another. And I feel like, you know, when people feel like the odds are always stacked against them, I'm always just like in my head, I'm like, it could be, but at the same time, I'm just like, everything's going to be okay. I just like, for some reason, like, you know, I think some of the things that I've been through has helped me have faith in that, like, you know, the balance will be there. And it's like, even though you don't feel like it's balanced, right? Just go power through the chaos, right? Yeah. And it's going to restore itself.
Like you said earlier, as cliche as it sounds, right? Weathering the storm is an actual thing. Yeah. Right. And we've been through it in our lifetimes and stuff with the physical world, but you know, no one gets to see the mental world. And only within the last 10 years have people really started to pay attention to, or society has been aware and woke about people's mental health, right? And things that affect them. Yeah.
Well, that's the crazy thing is that, like, I feel like that's our, oh man, how would I put this? I feel like that's our AIDS and like HIV. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, like they would talk about that. Like that was always the biggest thing, like that they talked about, you know, or like even infectious diseases. Like I remember, like even in elementary school, they would talk about like, you know, brushing your teeth. You know, they have certain initiatives that like, you know, they try to address in terms of health. And it's just like the information has become so accessible to everyone that it's like, what's the biggest thing that like needs to be addressed? Like in all honesty, is like people's mental health. Yeah. The messed up part about it is that they're always like, be aware of it, talk about it. Yeah. But then there's no like true solution.
Yeah, I think you brushed on it earlier about what, you know, as part of what you do every day and being there for people, not only physically, but being there for them mentally, right? And you have some sports athlete, maybe a star, tore his ACL, right? Yeah. Not only is his knee hurt, but his whole psyche is hurt and broken. I have a friend who tore his ACL and for like I believe it was like a week or two, man, he just went through a depressive state, and you know, he's pretty open about the fact that he did, but came out of it. But it kind of sucks when your body is meant to be physically able to do things that people can, and then it just breaks down, and you're like, oh fuck, what am I gonna do?
Yep. And that's, you know, like where we go back to that critical thinking piece, where we say like, okay, like, give you an example. I was working with one kid, right? He came off an injury, and he was working with me for a while, right? And I had a good relationship with him. And then like COVID happened and things happened. He eventually ended up going to one of the other clinics, right? And my first thing, you know, like where one person could be like, oh man, that, like, I can't believe they did that. Why did they do that, right? I just kind of looked at him like solid, he's gonna get working. I was like, my thing was always like, if like they need to be in a situation that is going to be good for them, so then that way they can achieve their goals. And like for me, it's like I'm in a facility where it's like, you know, it's kind of small, not really a gym like facility. It's kind of hard to feel like an athlete at sometimes. And, you know, I look at like some of the other clinics and some of the other equipments they have, and like athletes like to go there. And I'm like, if I was an athlete, like, yeah, I'd want to go there too. It's like, because, you know, it's about the environment, right? Like, for sure, there are psychological factors that come into play with an individual's experience. Like if an individual can go somewhere, right, and probably I could give the best care in the world, but if they don't like the experience, they don't like the environment, they like it somewhere else, they'll probably go to somewhere else.
You might not have that track grass that they're looking for. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's like
turf. That's what I meant. Track grass. What is that? Turf.
Bro.
Whatever it may be. It can be pull-up bars.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some people they just want certain things, and like for me, it's like I make the most out of what I got, and I always try to just, you know, maximize whatever I have to try to achieve the same goals. And I'm okay with that. I like that. I don't like to be like, oh, I need the best technology. Oh, I need that. Like, don't get me wrong. I look for new things because I like to experiment and see what's good.
Let's dunk you over here, and I'm going to pull you by your arms 8 times with this new machine that I got.
Exactly.
We're going to see how your body reacts. The reflexibility of your tendons.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And it's like, you know, people are like, you know, paying like hundreds and thousands of dollars or going to these places that have this specialized equipment, and I just kind of look at it. They do
work, right?
Yeah, they work to an extent, but my thing I always look at it is like, do they believe that it works? Like, probably. I'm like, all right, then it's probably gonna work. Yeah. I'm like, my thing is always like, no matter what happens when I work with someone.
What you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a placebo, because you know they talk about the placebo effect, but the placebo effect is still an effect. So if it's a positive effect, does it have value in a treatment, right? And then it gets messed up, because then it's like, okay, well, that goes to a whole ethical issue. Is like, are you doing a treatment that doesn't work, or are you doing a treatment that can work, that can open up?
Well, that's why they make you sign a waiver before you join their little study.
Exactly.
Like, you might get the placebo workout, pill, medicine, or you might get the real thing, or we just might give you water and sugar, right?
Yeah.
But we're using that also as a study.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, dude, studies get so messed up. Like, if you search, like, there are these things called like, I think shadow journals, where it's like you can pay and you can get a paper published that will pop up on like a Google Scholar search. Yeah. Like if you search up manual therapy cures death, that was an actual article that was published. Like that was something that was actually published, because we were looking, I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about like how there's issues in research and everything. And one of them is that like you got these shadow journals like coming up where like they're publications, right? But people are paying to put their papers on there. And so someone can say, I'm a published author, right?
It's almost how like Wikipedia used to be.
Yeah.
Right. Where anybody can just put anything about anything on it.
Exactly. And so
without it being peer reviewed. Now I think Wikipedia has some sort of peer review, right, with the users.
From my understanding, I know that they do have at least like link all the references, so you just can't put a statement there without a reference.
Right. Because back in the day, I remember when Wikipedia first came out, it's like, oh, you can't use Wikipedia for research. It's like, you got to go to the actual library and do your research. Like, for real? It's on the internet, though. Dude, this is 2006, 2007, right? And it's like, Now Wikipedia is the most reliable source there is on the internet.
Yeah. Now the problem is that social media now, because what's crazy is that like the one less
Wikipedia social media now? Is
no, just social media in general. It's like, do you remember the PSAs where they used to be like, oh, just remember, everything you see on the internet isn't always true. Just because it's on the internet, it isn't true. Someone says, this person said this. Everyone's like, oh my God, I can't believe they said that. And I'm just like, bro, were we the only one who watched the PSA? It's like, that was on everything. I like, every time I see something on the internet, I'm like, is that true? I'm like, I'm like, I'm
to the point where I don't know what to believe anymore. And it's just kind of, you just have to take everything. It's either you dive deep or you take it surface level and you just let it skim by the news or the headline or what you read.
Yeah.
Because man, it's ridiculous.
I will tell you what though, the one headline I am most excited about is sports coming back. I am
here on Guam.
Yeah, okay. I'm so excited for that, man. Like training, I was working with some of the athletes like just over quarantine, and like some of these kids were putting in work and like I was putting in work with them because like I'm there with them every day. Like I'm there 6 a.m. with them. I'm working, then like I got clients, I work all day, then I got clients in the evening, and I don't get home till like 7:30, 8 p.m. sometimes, and like I'm just working. And then just to like always hear, oh, there's no sports. Oh, it got pushed back. Oh, competition's canceled. Oh, we can't do anything. Like, dude, it's like, what? It gets so tough to like just stay committed.
But it's not going to go back to sports, right?
Yeah, but it's something. It's something where like,
what do you coach right now?
So right now I'm what's that word called? So I'm a performance trainer. I work individually with some clients. I was an assistant coach for basketball in the U17 men's national team back in 2019. I've coached track and field before with Desmond. But a lot of it right now is just strength and conditioning, and currently I'm working with our men's national team as a performance trainer and preparing them for the FIBA Asia Cup. So,
oh, nice. Okay, yeah. So no sport in particular that you're a coach of, but you're just a coach of people. Yeah.
So, and my thing is that like because I recognized early on that I didn't have the athletic capabilities to play basketball at an extremely high level, but like I loved the Guam national team because like I was someone who was always like not that skilled, not that good, right? But I liked playing basketball, and I had a solid, what I deemed a solid work ethic, right?
Solid view from the bench.
Yeah, right? That too. I liked it. Yeah, that's why I know things. That's why like when they break down film, I'm like, oh, I could break that down too. I used to do that. Yeah. But yeah, and
yeah, for sure.
And so like, I just really had to dive in like, okay, what can I do to be better? Because I was always looking for things. Like I remember being in high school, I would watch like all these old NBA tutorials, these how to do this move, how to do that move, right? And like there were just like videos from like Michael Jordan DVDs, Steve Nash DVDs, just like on ways to get better. So I would like really watch those, and it became obsessive. Like I became obsessive, not even with like necessarily the outcome, whether win or lose. I became obsessive with like trying to figure out how can I get better? Because at the end of the day, like my dad always told me, no matter how hard you work, there's always going to be someone better than you. So rather than being obsessed with winning, I was obsessed with how can I get better? And I think that's what I'm more proud of that I got from it, like, right, that I got from sports, is that you have to continue to work to get better, and that the job is never really done, versus like, oh, okay, the goal is achieved, we can relax, we can have fun now. Like, no, there's work to do, there's a next step. And so I committed like, my career and my passion to helping individuals get better. Like that's what I feel like I've really committed to. And so like I'm working with a lot of the youngins on the men's team doing extra stuff outside of just the strength and conditioning portion of our preparation for the Asia Cup. So I was working with a lot of them in the weight room, right? And then like one of them, he's shorter than me. He went up, tried to grab the rim with two hands, jumping off of one foot, and came down. And I looked at him. I was like, could you do that before? And he looked at me. He's like, yeah, I could do that. And then someone else was there in the gym. They looked at him. He's like, shut the hell up. No, you couldn't. You could not do that before. And like, it's like, because for me, I wanted to be what I didn't have. And not to say that I didn't have much, right? Like I had a very strong support system, and I had some very good coaches. Also had some coaches that weren't so great. Yeah. So, like in those times where like I felt like I needed someone to help get me better and someone to help elevate my game, I've committed like, you know, a lot of what I do to trying to be that person that I wish I had when I was a kid.
Yeah, for sure, man. I feel like a lot of people go through that phase, especially like as you reach towards your later 20s, later 20s and 30s. You're like, man, you start searching out these kids that you can possibly be mentors to, right? And give good advice. Shit people never told you before you went somewhere or did something or tried to take care of yourself, right? And it's like that kind of stems that idea or that thought, it kind of stems to a lot of different things, to just making the people around you better.
Yeah,
right? It makes you a desired person to be around when you're trying to bring everyone up. Because even back in the day, or even when we first started this show, it was like we always talked about Guam's is crabs in a bucket mentality, and everyone's trying to bring each other down. But as I talk to more and more and more and more people, it's like, no, not really. You know, we don't. From the outside, it seems like, or maybe, or maybe when you're looking at it from the inside, maybe it may seem like that. But for the most part, there's a lot of people who have wanted to bring everyone else up around them.
Yeah.
And we're getting more skilled. We have smarter people. We have more educated people than ever before, I believe. Not that back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there weren't educated people, but now it's twice as much, because now you can get educated online.
Yeah.
You don't even have to leave island to be educated.
And now you don't even have to leave your home to get educated.
Right. You don't have to leave your home and go to work.
Dude. How's
about that?
I went to go get my car washed, and I was like talking with someone, and they were saying like, hey, UOG's online. I don't know why they were asking me, but they were just like, UOG's all online this semester, right? Like, yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go register now. And I'm just like listening. I'm like, wow, yeah, people like just saying like, oh, I don't have to go to class, so I'm gonna register for school. I'm like, hey, you know what? That's a step. Yeah. I'm like, that's a step forward. So, you know, like,
for sure.
I think improving that accessibility has been something that's good. But like, even thinking about like, one thing that I like, and what you talked about, like how, you know, more people trying to bring each other up around each other, right? Is that, you know, a good example would be what happened with the vaccination process, right? Is that people were tearing down public health, saying they should have done this, they should have done that, right? And then they host that meeting and say, hey, look, you got these ideas, come and lay it down for us.
Yeah.
And people laid it down, and now things are a lot smoother. And I feel like that's just one of the things where it's like, yeah, it comes off a little bit negative, right? And it seems like, oh yeah, we're all trying to tear each other down. I'm like, no, it's just that we all think our own opinions are that important. And so if we don't feel like we're going to be heard, we're going to call.
We are in that age. If you're not commenting on Facebook about something.
Exactly. Mine is Twitter and Instagram. Yeah. I try to go off of Facebook. That's just oh man, I've gone through my phase of doing like, looking back at it, like senseless arguments. Like, don't get me wrong, like I feel like those arguments offered me a little bit of a perspective, and how like, you know, my way of thinking wasn't always the best way. And I appreciate that, and it's taught me to really like accept that we live in like this gray zone. But even at that, I'm just like, I just think Twitter's funnier, so a lot simpler.
Yeah, Twitter is more chaotic.
Yeah,
it's never the same. Right? It's always like, it's just people data dumping into the, you know, data dumping their brains into this platform. Like whether they're having a depressed thought, a happy thought, a mad thought, it's there. All of it's there. Yeah. You know, if you were to sort of take these 50,000 tweets that some people do, and you put it all into a system, it probably turn out your exact personality, right? And it's like, man, that's wild.
Yeah, that's how they're tracking you.
That's fucking wild,
dude. It's fucking scary, dude.
So, and social media, you know, even when I first started this, social media was never my thing, where I could like talk to the phone and do this and do that, record and stuff. Like, even just recording on these cameras was, and we're not even live, dude. And it's like freaky for me. Because also I grew up in the time when You know, in high school we had Nokias, right? We were playing Snake. We were playing Snake on our phone and stuff, right? It's
simple times.
Yeah, much simpler times.
Yeah.
I was in college when Netflix was first streaming. We're like, whoa, you can stream,
dude. That was a game changer.
Mom, I need to get better internet, Mom. Please, can you just help me out a little bit?
I was talking with my family, and someone said, like, I don't know where, I don't know if it was locally or somewhere in the States, but someone was saying, like, yeah, we need to open up the movies because people are going to get tired of streaming and they're going to want to go to the movies. And I'm like, I'm kind of hearing that. I'm like, what people is that person talking to?
yeah.
But yeah.
But there are people who do miss the movies.
Oh, I miss
and I'm one of them.
I miss the movies.
Just the experience.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Dude, you can select your
candy
seats now.
in and stuff.
Dude, you can select your seats now. We're finally
Philippines been doing that, right?
Dude, I know. I know. And even
so their seat number, there's actual reason for the seat numbers now, right?
Exactly. And it's just like, finally, I don't have to line up 2 hours before my movie to get a good seat and not break my neck trying to watch it at the front. Right. But yeah, no, it's crazy. Just like how much shit has changed, like from just the 2000s to 2020, and then, you know, COVID hits, and it's like this world that we built around us, right, was and this reality that we had was like, you know, it was very sustainable. Like, you know, everybody was like climbing up, things were going good for like a lot of different people. I just felt like,
dude, I did a live show, well, me and Matt, we did a live show in 2019, and we were like, shoot, let's do live shows all 2020. And then COVID hit,
dude. Oh, it was so bad.
The show never evolved.
Dude. And it's like 2020 was just that year where like everybody can talk about like how bad of a year it was. I kind of look at it and it's like, well, you know, retrospective view, like I'm looking back on it, and I'm just kind of looking at it like, 2020 is the year you find out what you're made of.
Yeah, man. You know, and surprisingly, I chose to do less podcasts. I tried online once, and it's just not me. You know, I like this this face to face, feel the energy, feel the conversation and stuff, and I just couldn't do it. And when I took a step down, every person is doing,
dude, there's so
online,
many podcasts now too.
You know, from podcasts to live shows to just shows, to people just doing Instagram live, right? And it's like, whoa, this is interesting. They probably got 500 million more people on the internet because of this, you know, like streaming live on the internet at one time, throughout the world, you know.
So that, and
because you kind of force that respect, you know.
Then you wonder why is it not loading? Why is the internet slow? Who's on this server? It's even more amazing that the internet can handle it. But yeah, man, it's the growth and just like seeing people like, you know, take that next step forward is like, what I like is that, you know, it creates more competition. But then I remember what someone else had said was competition breeds innovation. So now it's like, okay, new ideas are going to form, and that's where it's like, okay, this is where, you know, like for lack of a better term, the money's going to get made, right? It's like, who's going to come up with that next big idea,
right?
And like me, like where I kind of like to have big ideas, but I also like to be right. It was very hard for me to accept and learn and understand that when you have a big idea and you want to pursue it, you have to pursue it with the possibility that you could be completely freaking wrong.
Yeah.
And like I've seen that, like I'm watching.
You took the left and everyone took the right turn.
Exactly. Right? And so like everything I do, and like my friend asked me about it because I read a lot of articles. I think like I'm churning out about maybe like 3 or 4 a week because of some of the mentorship programs that I'm in, right? But it's like my friend was asking me, he's a personal trainer too, really good guy. His name's Giorgio Meneses, and he was asking me, he's like, what does it take for you to really buy into something or to really go against something or just like change your mind? I was like, dude, I never decide on anything without accepting the possibility that it could be wrong. Is because no matter how much we know, like we could be wrong. Dude, smoking cigarettes at one point in time, they thought it was a cool thing. They were doing it on planes. They were doing it everywhere. Now, cancer, lung disease, heart disease, all these other different things, right? And so it's just like, you just always have to kind of take things for what they are and just kind of accept what they are, but still think about all the other possibilities that could happen. Because even like some of the things that I've tried doing and implementing at the clinic where I thought like, okay, this is going to be the next big thing. Like one of them is blood flow restriction training. So what that is that it's basically a modality where it cuts off a certain percentage of your blood flow, right? And then you do an exercise circuit, right, at a specific load. And what it does is that it leads to a similar chemical response that has adaptations in both muscular size and muscular strength while working at less weight. So like, for example, you could take two individuals, one is squatting 100 pounds, one is squatting 20 pounds, right? The person squatting 20 pounds uses blood flow restriction, the other person doesn't, right? And you will see similar gains in strength and muscle size between the two individuals, right? So I thought like, oh my God, this is the best thing. I can get people strong, I can build up muscle, I can do all these different things, right? Without having to get them actually lifting, right? And then I dive into more of the literature, and then it starts talking about like, okay, it depends on what kind of issue the individual has present, whether they have, whether they actually are exhibiting some atrophy, right? So some decaying muscle where they need muscle growth. Is it an actual muscle issue, right? Is it something else? Is it a movement issue? Is there something mechanically going wrong? What are they able to tolerate? What are they not able to tolerate? So what I thought was like initially a very solid tool that I could use with everybody, I bust out maybe every now and then. You know what I mean? And it's just like, just comes with time. And just like I got it knowing that like, okay, this is going to be extremely beneficial. And I started using it more, experimenting more. And then I said, okay, all right, let me try doing the same thing and not using that. And then still similar results.
Same results.
Exactly. And so, you know, it's like what comes out and you think may be the best thing, right? You get your own experience, read what the evidence says, right? You read what other people are talking about, talk with other clinicians, right? Some people swear by it. Some people say, oh, I don't really use it, right? Evidence says that it works. Evidence says that it doesn't work. But at the end of the day, like I have to take all that information and then look at this person in front of me and just say, is this even a right choice for this person?
Right. So what do you hold on to most? Do you hold on to the core basics that you learned in school, or do you learn the things that you have accumulated after school, outside of school?
At the end of the day, I'm still holding on to the basics of school. And this is the crazy thing, is that the basics that they taught us in school wasn't necessarily anything like scientific. It was communication, education, and empathy, right? Because at the end of the day, you need to be an effective communicator when you work with individuals. And that's one of the things that I really work on. Like,
yeah, man, you're very good at communicating.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Sometimes I communicate too much. So if I overdo it, just slap the mic out of my face.
It's like, hey, man, put this away.
Exactly.
My turn to talk.
Yeah. So, you know, it's like you think about those three basic things, right? Is like you got to communicate. You got to be able to talk to people in a language that they can understand, or things that and offer it in perspectives in which are meaningful to them, right? Because my thing is like, if it's not meaningful to a person, they're not going to care. Right. And so,
and if you show them that you don't care, they're really not going to care.
Exactly. There are certain things I don't care about. They're like, oh, it hurts. Like, I know it hurts, but you still have to do it. Well, you know, that's a little joke. Right. But yeah. And then education is like, dude, sometimes people, they come in and they don't know what's going on with them. Right. And so just making sure that there's a foundation for which, like, you know, the individual understands like why they're doing X, why they're doing Y.
Sounds like you ride the borderline of being a physician.
I mean, what we do isn't necessarily different in terms of caring for patients, right? And what I tell people is like, you know, sometimes like people come in, they saw the orthopedic surgeon, and then they'll be like, oh yeah, they said my only options was PT or surgery. And I'm like, well, a surgeon's gonna recommend surgery because that's what they know,
PT, right?
Well, so yes, you could, but the way I always tell people is like, surgeons are gonna recommend surgery because that's what they know. Doctors are gonna recommend medication because that's what they know. I'm gonna recommend exercise because that's what I know. I don't cut out the communication, the education, or the empathy portion of it, right? At the end of the day, I try to recommend what I feel like, you know, would be best for the individual. But at the same time, it's like, you know, you go back to what you know, right? And there is no way that any single person on this world can know absolutely everything. Stephen Hawking was a freaking great physicist. I don't think he would be great at a lot of other different things. You know what I mean? We can only do so much. And that's why you get like individuals who, you know, like coming out of high school, like they're looking at scholarships, they're looking at, you know, college acceptance and all these other things. They're looking for extremely versatile individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Me, it's like if I was in that position, I'm looking for a versatile individual, not because I'm looking at what skill sets they have. I'm looking at how have these different events and these different traits that you have shape your character. Because at the end of the day is like, you know, what kind of character are you, right? Because like I was, you know, in high school, I was, what's that called? I was in choir, track, basketball, right? NHS, all these different things, right? And it looks really nice, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think
still be an asshole. Exactly.
Like, I don't think that means shit if I'm not a good person. And so I think like, you know, where more than anything, like I've talked with my friends about it and my colleagues, like for some of the projects that I want to build. And like, I'm kind of quoting off of some other strength coaches that, I've followed and learned from. Right. And I subscribe to their train of thought. And
I was interesting. You say that. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. So, not from me. I heard it from someone else first.
That's good. That's good.
Some of these,
I use that.
Yeah. So I subscribe to their train of thought. And the reason why, or one of the things that I subscribed to was like, we don't teach strength and conditioning. We teach leadership and personal development in the form of strength and conditioning. Because think about it, right? Like you want kids to do sports. You don't want to do sports. You don't put them in sports because they're one day going to be a professional. You don't put them in dance because one day they're going to be a professional dancer. You don't put them in, you know, school because they're going to be a professional student. You do that because they're going to learn lessons that will give them experience to where they can make better decisions in future situations. And so like, that's what I do. Like, you know, as a coach is that like, one of the things I always try to teach my athletes is like fundamentals are key. Like you do the basics and you do the basics well. Yeah.
It doesn't matter how great you get. You see the greats still working on the fundamentals.
Exactly. And it's like, even like, and as boring as it is, it's like fundamentals, right?
Yeah. I started doing jujitsu a couple years ago, and I went back on Friday, this past Friday, and for the first time since COVID started, and because in July I separated my AC joint when we get there, and so I went into class and I told myself, I was like, okay, let's not try to regain everything I used to know. Let's work on all the fundamentals that I do remember. Man, it got me through the night, you know, rolling 5 rounds. It's like, even though I was dead tired, I still was able to use the basic fundamental technique that I was taught when I first, you know, previous, you know, in the first year before COVID, got me to survive that first night. Yeah. Not even do good. Just survive.
Hey, bro, when you start off, that's always the goal. Survive,
dude. So, yeah, man, and it's good. It's good. I was worried. I was mainly worried about the shoulder I injured last summer. But you know, I feel like it took a mindset for me to want to get better and heal my body. It's not completely healed, but whether it does or not, I'm still pushing my way through that. Yeah.
That's, dude, like just that last part that you said, that's the biggest thing for me is like when I work with patients sometimes, it's like, sometimes, you know, it's not everyone, but like, you know, sometimes you get people that are just hard on themselves and sometimes they just don't want to get better. And like the hardest part is for me is like, you can tell when an individual doesn't really give that much thought to it. Right. And so you're kind of just like, okay, they're not giving much thought. Like, why should I give much thought? But then it's like, okay, if I don't care, who will? You know what I mean? Yeah. And like, that's why it's like, man, I think one of the most influential moments when I was in a PT school, I was doing a clinical in Texas, and there was this one lady, she was there, dude, she had some stuff going on, right? She had a very interesting perception of reality, thinking that people were going to send her to a different hospital because they didn't care about her, yet she was there for a whole 2 weeks, and every day was always, they're going to send me away. I'm like, why are you still here? And so, but it's just like, you know, like it was interesting. The reason why it was influential was because I was treating when one of the med students was coming in, and you know, we just got this person out of bed. They hadn't gotten out of bed in like over a week, right? Not a lot of people want to deal with her, and I could see why. And then this med student comes in, and I can tell she was a little bit innocent to the experiences of individuals with unique situations. And so she just kind of dropped the news. Oh, okay, yeah, so we did this, and then this is going to happen. So you're going to go here. Like, what? I don't want to go here. Like, no, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And just, this lady's breaking down. And the worst part about it is that I'm listening to this girl talk, and she just went there. She was just a messenger. She just dumped the news and dipped. Yep. And I was just like, and me and my clinical instructor were just like, what the fuck? We just worked so hard to get this lady out of bed, and then she just had another mental breakdown. And it was just like testing. It was like, it really felt like God was testing patience. But at the end of the day, I was just like, all right, she's gonna be upset. I'm like, empathize, get through the session. Offered reassurance, like, hey, you did great, look at all the things you did today, you know. And it's like really just like, you know, try and provide encouragement and everything. And then we started the cycle the same day over again. Yeah. But then I talked with my clinical instructor about that. I was like, damn, dude, I got pissed off when she walked in. He was like, why, what happened? I was like, bro, she just communicated so poorly to that patient. You know what I mean? Like, you know how you talk about like individuals who are able to read the room? Yeah. Like, dude, I'm worried because I've met like some people, no disrespect to anybody who is an MD, but I've met people in med school that just do not know how to read a room. And so I'm just like listening to them talk and like work with people, and I'm just like, I don't want you to be my doctor. And it's like, you know, no disrespect to any of them, but it's just like, I see why like things like communication, education, you know, and empathy and being able to connect with people like on some meaningful level plays such a role when what you do involves working with people. And I feel like that's just something where it's like all these things that I learned in med school, I'm like looking at it like, or not in med school, I'm sorry, physical therapy school. But it's like all those, because even like my roommate at the time, he was in med school, like they would do some of those things, of course, to a lesser extent because they had way more information to learn, right? Like, but it's like, I just kind of look at it like, man, when your field like deals with people, like the same principles apply, right? Like, are you a good team player? Can you do all these different things? And it's like,
and it's almost like the technical stuff have to be second nature. Exactly.
And so, you know, it's like you get all these people that are just coming out extremely book smart, like zero social skills, zero teamwork skills, right? And everything. And you wonder why, like, you know, colleges and schools are putting in more group projects and team projects. I'm like, that's how the world works nowadays.
Yep.
And so I just really feel like whenever your field or profession involves like working with another individual, right? Of course, computers are a little bit different, right? But if you work with an actual human being, if you can't communicate and you don't know how to like empathize with someone or like what they got going on and like build some kind of connection with them, I'm like, you're going to have a hard time doing what you do.
Yeah, that's why I have a problem with this telemedicine, anything, because it takes away from the human aspect. Like, what's the difference between a robot telling me exactly what you're going to tell me without having any emotion to it? Like now if you're a doctor and you do telemedicine or something, now the patient just becomes a number and they're just a schedule on your thing. You just show up, 15 minutes. How you doing today? Okay. Next one. Nope. Right.
And like, that's why I'm so like impressed with people who have like, there are clinicians and healthcare professionals that have just gone on to do like either full consulting or part-time consulting, like online, right? And just offering those services and making it available. Or sometimes like they have no choice but to do that. But I look at it.
That's true. Yeah.
But I just look at it and I'm just like, dude, they're still able to flip that switch. You know what I mean? Like they're like, cause I get, you know, like being here with you and like what you said before, like, you know, you couldn't do online. You have to be here with that person, right? Like you get a certain energy from being around with someone, right? And so I'm impressed with the people that do so much virtual stuff because they're able to reproduce that same energy without the same environment. And that's the part where I'm just like, man, I am struggling with that. And it's like, if you could do that now, like, guess what? You just tore down every single barrier. Like, you no longer need to actually go anywhere. And like any barrier where it's like, oh, they're too far away. Oh, this, oh, like that excuse. Like, that's no longer an excuse anymore. You're tearing down barriers. So it's good. But I think it requires a different mentality.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe I should correct what I say in saying that telemedicine is bad, but it can be taken advantage of is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
Is where people will look to be like, okay, now I don't really have to care about my patients. But you're right.
Bro,
People, there are people who still, I mean, they do therapy online, right? And there's still people that do show that sense of care to patients, right? Yeah.
And speaking of like, telemedicine, patients being treated like a number, bro, that's already happening in medicine, dog. That's happening. That's happening everywhere, man. Like, people get pushed around. They go through like, patient mills. Man, I get patients telling me sometimes like, they're like, I just don't want to go back to the doctor because I waited an hour, to get in. They only saw me for 20 minutes and they just offered me medication. They didn't even do anything or tell me about what's going on, and that's where it's like, it's like sometimes like, yeah, that's the model. Like, especially depending on what system you work in. Sometimes like, are you dying? No. All right. Okay, good. What can I help you with? This. All right. This is a quick fix. Well, I need more. All right. Okay. Here, go see someone else next. You know what I mean? Like, that's just the model it is. But it's like, at the end of the day, I think like, those individuals have different priorities over ours. And my thing is that like, if you want that better service, that's where people like, it's happened in the States, it's happened in Hawaii, like consultation, like concierge, they're concierge doctors where they just like, no, I don't take insurance. I do cash based, but I can offer you the best care I can. That's something that like in the States is going on a lot. And that's something where I wanted to kind of bring it here. I wanted to bring in a cash-based physical therapy service, right? Because you got like people out in the States charging like anywhere from $120 to like $200 for hour sessions, right? And I was talking with some colleagues about that, and they were just like, "Yeah, that's not gonna work here." And I really thought about it. Well, and that's what I started thinking about. So for me, I know it's something that I don't want to do because I don't want to provide that level of detailed care to every single person where like they have that expectation, because it's like I feel like sometimes when you pay that kind of money, right? There's certain expectations like, oh, okay, this guy's going to solve everything, or they're going to do a special trick, or they're going to do, this new technique, or I'm going to leave feeling great, right?
Right.
And my thing is that, like, if I'm charging that premium price, I don't want to give people false expectations. You know what I mean? So I just kind of feel like, look, I'm going to do the best job that I can, like things are going to go up and down. That's just life. Got to accept it for what it is. And I'm going to help you navigate this. You know what I mean? And I feel just like for me, it's just not a product that I fully believe in because I don't really fully believe in myself yet, because I still got a lot of growing to do.
Well, it almost sounds like you got to be a life coach at the same time as being this physical coach, right?
Exactly. And like, sometimes like I could go all full life coach mode, right? And then other times I'm just like, man, if I'm seeing like anywhere from 8 to 10 patients a day, I'm like giving that kind of energy. And I've noticed this at home too, is like, I don't have energy to give to my parents, like my fiance, like other people. It's like there comes a social cost of energy, like, with doing that kind of service. And for me, I'm just like, that's not for me. And I've accepted that, like maybe at a different point in time, but like for where I am right now, I think that I have a lot more growing to do on my own before I'm ready to help others grow, to take on a volume of individuals and help them grow at the rate that I want to. Because like for me, it's
to make it feasible, right? For you to live.
Yeah. Exactly. And like, not only that, dude, is like, you work hard, you want things to be good, right? You want to have some kind of sense of predictability or likelihood of like, oh, okay, this is going to turn out great. And I feel like I'm just a little too inexperienced to have that kind of sense, I would say, like kind of that gut feeling. So like for me, I'm just kind of like, you know what, I kind of am okay where I'm at right now. I got some growing to do. I'm gonna help other people grow. I am 26 years old.
Okay. Yeah, you're still young.
Yeah. And so that's why I'm just like, you know what, like I got time to figure out. And I got people who are my age or younger than me, like killing it in the game. Like I got friends who like right off the bat after graduation, cash-based practice, seeing over 40 clients, like nonstop learning. And I just look at that, I'm like, oh yeah, I tried doing that one time. It's called graduate school. I burnt out. I learned my lesson the first time. I'll go a little bit slower.
Do you think it's because you've become too emotionally involved with the practice, the whole three pillars that you were talking about, that causes you to be able, or that's causing you to burn out or experience that sort of social burn?
Yeah, I think that's one role of it.
I mean, it's an advantage,
Yeah.
right? Because you're empathetic, and being empathetic is huge these days, right? Being communicative and just understanding and being able to educate. But also on the other hand, it's like 3 of the most burning things, right? It's like exhausting things to do all at one, not only separately, but all at one time, right? Every single time, every single day.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it's like, I got colleagues who are in the States, and like some of them will see like 20 patients in one day. And I'm just like, how are you doing? They're like, I'm tired. I don't want to do anything. And it's like, because it's like you have to, what was it? Oh, just from Michael, from that Last Dance documentary, you got to be present at all times. You know what I mean? When you're in that room with them, you can't be daydreaming. You can't be thinking about something else. You got to be fully present. And yeah, it does take that burnout. You also enjoy it. It gets tougher, like, because I could handle a higher workload and say like, I'm having a great day. This is what I love. And then I also can have days where I'm just like, damn, this is real shitty. I don't want to do it. I think some of it is like the wins, right? Because, with when you work with people, you get wins and you get losses. Sometimes you get like a lot of wins. Sometimes you get a lot of losses. Sometimes it kind of balances out so you have an okay day. But I think like when I really felt the burnout, it was just like, hearing a bunch of different difficult cases and just like, trying to compartmentalize it with it. Because sometimes you're there and you're just like, you're doing the best you can, but you just don't see that progress, right? And it's like, because you're emotionally invested and their lack of progress feels like your lack of progress. Right. That's where I feel like the burnout is. And I've bounced back.
That's right. Oh,
yeah.
You're not seeing a patient improve, or a person who's coming to see you improve. It's like, what the hell did we spend the last 3 weeks doing?
Exactly. So like, when that patient feels like, well, what the hell did I just do? Some people, they're able to brush it off like, that's just what it is sometimes. Me, I'm just like, I look at it and I'm just like, man, what the fuck did I miss, dude? I'm like, what did I miss? You know what I mean? Because like at the end of the day, it's like, they're working off of what I've told them, what other people have told them, right? And I'm just looking at it like, man, did I do everything that I could to help this individual? And that's where it like, kind of eats away at me, is because I'm so emotionally invested to it. And that's where it's like, that passion where it gets kind of difficult because you can burn out from it.
Yeah. And also you got to remember that, 90% of their life happens outside of that 1 hour that you're spending with them. And it's dependent upon what they're doing at home. They can have a leg injury, but you don't know if they're at home. They're like trying to sprint on the treadmill, right?
Oh,
whatever it may be, or kick a soccer ball to their kid, right? Knowing they have injured legs. So there's a lot of uncontrollables or uncontrolled circumstances that you have to deal with. It's like, oh, what happened there? It's like, this was getting good.
Yeah.
It's like, we were at the beach.
Yeah.
And they had this thing where I can jump off, and I decided to jump off, and I didn't land correctly.
Yeah. Dude, it's so funny. Like I'll see people coming in and they're just like, oh, what are they here for? Oh, they're here for their back. Like, oh, okay. They come in on crutches, and I'm just like, so what's going on tonight? Oh, well, I hurt my back, all this other stuff. Yeah, but I'm feeling pretty good now. I'm like, okay. So what's going on with those crutches? And then they're just like, oh, I sprained my ankle the other week. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. And then it's like, and then sometimes like, I just like the referrals, like, for their back, but I just kind of look at it like, hey, that ankle, like you can walk on it. Go ahead, just start weaning off the crutch, just start putting more weight on it, because it's like, I'm supposed to treat their back, but I'm just like, man, I gotta tell, like, that's not the thing that's bothering them right now. You know what I mean?
For sure.
And
man.
it's just like, it's just like, sometimes you're just like really working with people and, they're just okay with it. But at the end of the day, it's just like, we are providers. So it's our job to, help others. And, especially with that education portion, right? Like, if you can give someone something that can help better their lives or better their outcomes, right? Like, that takes no effort on your part and just raise their awareness, then, that's beneficial to them. That's why it's like,
maybe that's where the switch off happens, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of not having too much of that concern outside of the clinic of when they come in the next time that can maybe aid in increasing this volume, right?
Yeah. And so that's where it's like, I try to do more of getting newer people into the clinic and try to do less of following up like frequently with patients.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because I try.
What's your threshold?
What's my threshold? So, I don't really have one. I just try to make sure that I have a full schedule. Like I'm trying to see patients from 8 to 5. In terms of new patients, I try.
Well, threshold for repeat.
At most,
just depends on the injury.
It depends on the injury. It depends on and it depends on what the person wants. Sometimes people, they want to come in 3 times a week. They want that work, so they'll do that, right? Other times people, most times, like if it's relatively acute and I need like frequent updates, like of how they're doing, then I'm like, okay, we'll go 2 times a week. But if it's where the case is like, for me, like pretty stable for my preference, I try to do like once a week. And sometimes like on rare occasions, I do like for cases I know where healing may take a little bit longer to occur. Like I may go like, okay, we'll go once a month, right? It just depends on person to person, but I try to make it as affordable for the individual, right? Because there is, a time, a financial and a social cost, to having to try to make it to appointments. But my thing is that like, okay, I got 30 minutes. I need to identify what can make the biggest impact for this person right now and give them things to work on at home. So like there's one individual that I'm working with, right? And she just got off of surgery and she's doing Pilates and she's working with me, right? And everything I do is I'm always like, she's like, yeah, I go to Pilates. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I think of like, they got more equipment there than me. She spends an hour there. She only spends 30 minutes here. I'm like, all right, this is what you need to work on. We're going to find out what you can do today. And then I'm going to have you start doing it with her. And a lot of it is just like, just a lot of teaching, just a lot of kind of testing, see what they can handle, try to get them to a point where they're stable. And some people who have like more long-term goals, like they want to get back to sport, those are like longer timelines. So with that, just because of the facility that I'm in and the volume of patients that, still need to come in, I just kind of look at that. I'm like, okay, can you commit to doing this program on your own? And if they say, yeah, I'm like, okay, all right, go ahead, do this program, stick with it, or work with this person, go train with that person, come check me in a month, or let me know if you have any issues, and we're just going to follow up. I want to see how you're doing, right? Make sure everything's going on the right path. I may take you through a few things, but I just kind of look at them like, you don't need to be in a medical office for too long. You know what I mean? Right. And it's like, even for, I was listening to a presentation about the differences between professional sports rehab versus outpatient sports rehab, right? Just to kind of give us a perspective on what goes on in that, right? Like, are these athletes healing faster? Like, well, maybe not necessarily, because it still takes, like, if someone sprays an ankle, it still may take anywhere from 2 weeks to a few months to heal, depending on, the severity of the injury, right? So people are like, are they healing faster? I'm like, no, they just have access to better resources, and their therapist is with the team. So if the therapist says, oh, hey, I need somebody to work off of pushing off of this foot, hands them off to the player development coach and just says, yeah, they're good. I just need to see them push off of that foot, making all these different shots, right? And the player development coach will be like, okay, that's my thing. Therapist just sits back like, how does he look? Does he look good? Is he breaking down? Any signs of pain? Can he handle it? And biggest thing, is he safe to go back to what he needs to do, right? And so
to play at full,
exactly,
full capacity,
exactly. And like, when you're on that, like I haven't been on a professional sports team, but I have been in like, team environments where it's like, someone goes down, they hurt their knee or they go down, and I look at it, and my first thing is always like, are they safe to play? You know what I mean? And like, give you an example, when I was out coaching, right? One of our guys out in New Caledonia, one of our guys got a concussion. He looked good, he looked good, he, felt good. He had a slight headache, but he wanted to play, right? And I just talked about it with our head coach, and I'm like, nah, he had a concussion, 1 day of rest. And it was like a big game for us, because I'm like, we could beat this team and possibly advance, but I just kind of looked at it, I was like, nope, we got to rest him. That's the biggest thing. The risk is, like, there's a risk, and the consequences, should something happen, are pretty bad. So I'm just like, we're going to play it safe on this.
Yeah, and you're starting to see the role that you play and stuff like that. Really determines the longevity of players, and even after they play, right?
Yeah.
Look at the health, the way they took care of the health of players in the early 2000s, and how many of them are going through. I'm talking about football in particular. gone through CTE, right, and effects of the brain, and because they're playing through too many concussions and this and that, and you know, it's critical. Those roles that physical therapist role has become critical to sports teams.
Yeah, and that's why it's like, I love what like Draymond Green had to say about, you know, the double standard for like, you know, being a player in the NBA, where it's like, the player says he wants something, all of a sudden he's a cancer to the team, but nobody wants to talk about the organization. Nobody wants to talk about all the things that are going on behind the scenes, right? And it's like, kind of just like, you know, you get a good employee who has a good job, right? Like, and then, you know, all of a sudden they just like, I want to leave. Like, oh, why would you want to leave? You're so good here. You know, like, we've given you everything, but they're just like, look, I'm not happy. I need that new opportunity. I need that new space. And then all of a sudden, like, that person is deemed as a bad player, but I'm like, look, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes within that organization, right? Like a player, like sometimes a player may just be a dick, and they may just be bad to the team and causing some trauma within the organization. So yeah, they probably are, you know, not a good person. But at the same time, sometimes players, they just want to leave, dude. They need something different. And even at that, it's like, there are certain things where it's like, okay, we have a game, there's a game coming on. It's a big night. Fans are expecting this person to play. This person's not safe to play. Organization wants him to play, right? That's the team doctor's job to make sure that he doesn't. I'll give you an example. Isaiah Thomas for the Boston Celtics. He hurt his hip. That doctor cleared him to play. His career does not exist in the NBA anymore, right? Right. And think about that pressure. He had to play. It was a good playoff year for the Celtics. They were looking good. He was their best player, on his way to be an MVP. Right. And because I don't know what happened in that medical room, but I'm sure there was pressure from the organization to try to get this man on the court, right? And so look at where he's at now. So like, I take, you know, when I try to tell someone like, hey, you should back off, or hey, you should be good to go, right? But more importantly, whenever someone asks me like, hey, am I cleared to go? And I just kind of look at them. Do you feel ready to go? Are you able to do everything that you can do? And that's why, like, when I work with sports patients specifically, I always try to put them through the ringer and just put them through everything that they would possibly have to do. And if they look like, and they'll realize that they can't do it. And then I'll just be like, you think you're ready to go back to sport? They're just like, no. And I just see that face like, all right, good, let's get back to work. Hit these squats. Yeah.
Do you see a difference? How long you've been practicing here on Guam?
It's almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in May.
Okay. So in the 2 years that you've practiced here and what you've done out in the States, are you seeing any generalizations between, you know, what you see there and what you see here, or any specific differences that you can identify the way people treat their impairments or injuries?
I think it's all very nuanced, because
or it's just a person thing, individual.
I think it's more of like a clinic thing, because it's like, if somebody wants to go in and get some special like massage or hands-on treatment, right, from a physical therapist that may offer that boutique service, right, that's one thing. But then at the same time, you could also get a referral from a doctor saying you need to go to this person because there's a specific medical diagnosis that needs to be addressed, right? So I think it's very context specific, and I think for the most part, a lot of individuals, or a lot of the way that we treat here on Guam, is very still in that medical model rather than a boutique model, because we still try to, you know, treat individuals and what they have to get them to be relatively healthy and well, right? And in addition to that, I think one of the things that is nuanced in terms of how we treat versus how people in the States treat is that people in the States, there's so much variety and there's so many options to choose from that people just start offering like specialty services, right? That are like, how would I put this? Not necessarily deemed even special.
It's almost like, it's almost become novelty-ish.
Yeah. And
it's like turning medical practice into novelty, or clinician practice into novelty items.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, oh, we have this thing, we have that thing, we do this thing, we do that thing, right? And it's like, I kind of look at it, I'm like, okay, you can do this, you can do that. And I kind of look at that and I'm just like, all right, is the person getting healthier at the end of the day though? Right. You know what I mean? Like, you could offer any kind of service, help people get out of, you know, whatever whatever issue they have, and they'll feel like, oh, this guy fixed it, right? Like he helped me with my pain and everything, and now I can do this. And like at the end of the day, I'm just like, okay, as long as you're working to get people healthy, right, and improve their health and wellness, or improve what's going on with them in a meaningful context to them to achieve their goals, right, then all physical therapy practices is relatively the same. I think what we miss is that like we don't have that extreme boutique where it's like, oh, I have 5 different certifications, I'm a hands-on expert, I work with all the pros, all like.
Not only that, I do East Asian medicine.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think that's the thing that we don't have, and I think that's a good thing, because for the most part we're all still practicing with relatively what we know to be the best evidence, with of course within the best of our abilities. And so I think one of the things that's really different here is, or at least with the way that I treat and the way that I've seen other clinicians treat, it's like I find it to be just kind of like a Guam mentality too, which I feel like drives me, and found success where others may not have, is you just got to make the most of what you got. Like, we don't see barriers, we just see situations and we find solutions. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like sometimes
sometimes some of the things are not always available.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, and it's just like, well, we need this, and you just kind of got to look at it like, well, it's not a reality. It's not going to happen.
You may need it.
Yeah.
But I got an alternative solution for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes people are just like, oh, should I ice it? Like, you could. Does it feel better? Yeah. I'm like, yeah, sure. Why not? Throw some ice on it. Yeah. Yeah. If it feels better, yeah, do it. Do I need to? I was like, well, I don't know. This is conflicting. I mean, evidence is like, if it feels good, it feels good. Let's not question that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a hot topic in the world. Someone had posted something about the guy who coined the term rice, and saying that the author who originally came up with it had retracted that statement because there are some studies showing that icing is actually delaying the healing process and inflammation. So whenever there's an injury that occurs, or some type of tissue damage, what happens is that there's a healing cycle that happens, right? And part of that cycle is first the cleanup crew. So you have a bunch of different white blood cells and different how would I put this, specialized cells, cleaning up the damage there, right? That's why things like swelling occur, and that's why things like, maybe possibly some discoloration and some tenderness occur, because that's healing. And so following that, then after the tissue has been cleaned up, then it begins to slowly rebuild itself, right? Then you get these other specialized cells coming into the injured site and laying down the specific types of proteins.
That's amazing. Listen to this guy, Matt. Are you hearing him? Yeah. That's no. It's just amazing to just hear the body. Just hear you talk about the body doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And you think of any injury that you have, right, or have had, and the things that, and what you're explaining is like, shit, cleanup crew comes. Yeah, a little bruising, little inflammation there, a little soft, sensitive to the touch.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden feels better.
Yeah. And that's why sometimes people are like, that's why sometimes like I just stick through it with people, because I'm like, okay, this is gonna feel better at some point. I just got to stick with them. Like, it's not getting better. Like, oh, one day it'll click. Yeah. One day, I believe in us. And there's that process that happens. Then eventually, once that new tissue is laid down and basically the whole foundation has been rebuilt, that foundation needs to be exposed to different types of physical stress so that it can handle what it needs to handle. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, think of it like skin. You get a cut, right? You get a cut, then you see the scab forming, right? Yeah. That scab now.
Peel the scab.
Yep.
You put it in your mouth.
and so
spit it out.
And so what happens is like, underneath that scab, you're rebuilding that tissue, right? And so what happens is, if you pick the scab too early, what happens? It bleeds. The healing process hasn't completed. So then that's where you have sometimes these chronic rehabbers where they're like, okay, I feel good, I'm gonna go, right? That's just like picking off a scab when it's still bleeding underneath. Then additionally, right, check this out. Just because, sometimes people, they keep picking at the scab, right? And sometimes, even though the scab looks like it's good, it feels good underneath it, right? it can't withstand the same load that it used to because it hasn't been exposed to enough physical stress under the appropriate amount of time to restore its former capacity. So what I always talk about when I work with patients is, when they get hurt, right? They're always like, yeah, I used to be able to do this, but now this hurts. I'm like, okay, so this is what's going on. You have this kind of threshold and capacity that your body can operate at and sustain at, right? You're following that injury that initially dropped. That ability in which you could function has dropped. Now you feel better. And so it comes back here. It came back up, but it's not all the way back up to where it used to be, but it's much better than it was before. All those things you want to do, they're right there with it, or slightly above it, depending on what's going on, right? And so you got individuals where they're trying to figure out, like, why has this been bothering me for so long? Like, well, it feels better, it healed, but but where you're operating at is basically your ceiling. You're operating where you can handle, and that is where exercise comes into play because you become exposed to this type of stimulus. You become exposed to those kinds of physical stressor. The body says, holy shit, what the hell are we doing? I better be ready for this the next time. Ceiling goes up. Oh, I can handle more. Okay, you can handle more, right? They go overboard. Oh, that hurts so much. Like, you didn't give it enough time. You got to rebuild that ceiling. And so...
great analogy, man. That's great.
Yeah. And so, whenever I work, and I break it down like with even like my general population patients is sometimes like, why are we doing all these things? I was like, how hard it is now? Yeah. Those flights of stairs you want to walk up that you have a hard time doing? Yeah. That'll be easy in 2 weeks. Trust me. Trust me.
Yeah. Interesting, man. Yeah. So I injured my shoulder back in July. I landed right on it. So the diagnosis was initially I thought I popped my shoulder out, but I didn't. It never came out. It was the
AC joint.
AC joint. So yeah, it's typical that this thing would come up, right? And so the doctor said I only need surgery if I want it to look nice again. But other than that, it should heal well. Every now and then I get pain. Like I said, I went to jiu-jitsu on Friday. I play touch rugby every week, and prior to a month ago, basically exercising every single day. Not necessarily. I did physical therapy, like for a month, and then the COVID shutdown happened and I never went back. And but I feel I don't feel like it's back to 100%. I do feel like it's maybe around 85. I am still I'm able to lift things above my head, which is not recommended, right? When you initially get the injury. But I don't know. What do you think is I should be doing rather if not going to rehab and say what do you think I should be doing outside to at least maintain it? Am I losing my power or the strength in it every time I'm not doing some sort of rehab on it? Or I guess what I'm asking is there a threshold where it stops decreasing in strength, or do I have to consistently for the rest of my life keep it at that optimum strength, right? To keep that capacity, that load capacity.
That depends. Like, so I always say that each individual is different, right? With that being said, there is the SAID principle. So specific adaptations to impose demands. So long as you are using it for certain things, your body will adapt to those specific demands that are placed on it, right? And now if you go and try to operate within the capacity outside of it, you may or may not experience some type of pain or discomfort. Now, it's pretty tricky. So first off, there's a lot of different things we could break down in that. So the first one is that strength will generally decline just over time with age, right? That's why you see individuals who don't exercise regularly, right? Things become harder. Stairs become harder. Getting up off the couch becomes harder. Getting out of bed becomes harder because they're not maintaining or trying to build any sort of capacity that they already have, right? And that's why there are these guidelines by the American College of Sports Medicine for things like resistance training, things like aerobic capacity. So I think for aerobic capacity, I believe it's cumulatively 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise, which is, I believe, it depends. I can't remember the specific number, but it's within a specific heart rate zone. And that needs to be cumulatively at least 150 minutes a week, right? And then for resistance training, you need to do at least two times a week, anywhere from 8 to 12 sets of an 8 to 12 rep max repetition, right? And when I think about what that would look like in programming, it's basically saying you need to expose your joints, your tendons, and your muscles to some type of mechanical tension to maintain their muscle mass and to maintain their muscle strength, right? The strength gets a little complicated because how do you define strength? You could define it as like, how heavy can you pick up something, right? Or how hard can you push or pull a fixed object, right? How high can you jump? There's many different variables about that, but it depends very specific on the context. So like if you want to be able to, use your shoulder as much as you can, right? Without it being hurt, right? Most important thing is that you keep using it. If you baby it, it will, there will be a decline in what it can handle, right?
Right. Yeah, man. And when the injury first happened, and I wasn't really doing anything. It was in cast. It was cast in place, right? And then I started going to physical therapy, and it was really good. You know, I mean, I felt it getting stronger every week I went. I was like, dude, this thing is getting easier, right? And then they'll introduce something a little harder, and it's like, oh shit, okay. And it makes sense, everything that you're saying. And it's not that it didn't make sense back then, but now that you kind of like you tie it all together, and with me stopping, yeah, of course I was gonna lose sort of that strength surrounding those workouts that I was doing, right? Because my body was becoming used to doing those things. But then I started getting into a different program, quote unquote program, where now I'm using my shoulder in a different way, right? I'm doing this move, right? And at first it would hurt, but now because I was doing it so much, now the strength has gone back, right? It's weird. And I bet if I start doing maybe the workouts that we were doing back in August when I was first doing PT, those would probably hurt because I'm not. Is it because I'm not exercising it in those ways anymore, or the muscle is just not? The muscle memory is kind of lost for that.
I would say that.
Or did I build upon what I had? What the original strength program was?
Well, that depends, because I mean, what type of stress is it exposed to? Because it could depend based off of the magnitude, the time, and the duration, right? So it's like, okay, this was like I've been working out, right? Like for example, I'm lifting heavy. I could lift heavy stuff, right? But then all of a sudden, if you have to lift lighter stuff for a long period of time, you may gas out because you're not, and it may hurt because you're not exposed to that. Right. Exactly. Or then if you say, okay, now you have to lift something fast, right? Because you haven't been exposed to that speed, then it's like, oh, snap, like this is starting to hurt. Additionally, you may move in a different direction, like, oh, okay, I can do, what's that called? You're like, okay, I can lift things overhead pretty good. I could, let's say you're strong enough to press your body weight overhead, right? Okay. Now let's see if you can do a handstand push-up. You know what I mean? Is that the same thing? No, because now the directions of forces that you're exposed to has changed relative to what it's used to, right? So we all have this inherent capacity to develop a work capacity or a load capacity or some type of tolerance to specific movements and demands, right? And then when you get exposed to new demands or new loads, right? The body is smart. Like it's like the best and craziest working piece of equipment that any individual can ever have, right? Because it is adaptable, right? If a string on a guitar snaps, right, the guitar won't restring itself. Now, certain injuries require surgical interventions, right? There's no doubt about that. But it's like, for the most part, we're pretty capable of fixing ourselves should something happen, right? Yeah. The tough part is that, like, a lot of people, their mindset is like, oh, I feel pain, thus something is still broken. And that's where the science has gotten really interesting within the past like 10 years, is because you can have pain without damage, but you could have damage without pain.
Right.
And so it's very interesting because even if you look at
so I can be injuring myself even more because I didn't properly complete a program.
Possibly. I mean, there's always that possibility. I mean, like what I tell people, if you don't want to get hurt, sit on the couch.
Right.
And then your back will probably hurt afterwards. But but I mean, like, like there's an inherent risk with everything, right? It's like, are you going to let it stop you? Like, no, not necessarily, right? I mean, you could go out and you could try to throw a football and it may hurt, right? But then if you practice throwing a football a little bit shorter distances, right? Then you work your way up and you're like, oh, okay, now I could throw that distance easy because you practice it. You were exposed to it. Your body found a solution with how to operate within its means. And that's the crazy thing about the dynamics of the body, right? Is that you have all these different constraints, right? You have your internal and external constraints, right? The internal constraints are the things that we have, right? Like our strength, our range of motion, right? Our body structure. And then you have the external constraints where you have things like the environment, right? Like is the wind going to help me throw the football today, right? Is the crowd going to give me energy, right? Am I going to feel in a low pressure situation so I feel comfortable throwing? And then you have the rules of the game, right? Like, okay, how many defenders are there? How far am I throwing, right? Am I on balance? Am I off balance, right? And they all interwork together, right, to produce some type of movement outcome. And so where it gets interesting is that you have these external constraints like the environment and your environment and the task, right? The rules of the game or whatever it is that you have to do. Ultimately, success is extremely predicated on the internal constraints, right? Because now, like, if I set external constraints for you to like, okay, I need you to throw a 40-yard football, right? No one's there, low pressure situation, it's a safe environment, right? But if your arm can't handle the task, then it likely will not be completed, right? You'll have some type of performance outcome that will be deemed either successful or unsuccessful. But then there becomes a loop. I can't remember the name of it, but I think it's action and perception, right? So it's like you perceive something as successful or unsuccessful. The body begins to make adjustments for it, and you begin to participate in these actions to where either something may change, right? Either in your mechanics, your solution and how you did things, right?
Is that the difference? Is that what makes the difference between two people who have the same injury and one person, a leg injury, and one person leaves with a limp?
Yeah, it could be. Like, honestly, straight up genetics, like an individual's ability to tolerate load, right? An individual's pain experience, right? Like I said, we talked about pain without damage and damage without pain, right? It's so variable, and it's like, you could have two exact the same injury, right? One person may be a professional athlete, one person may be a recreational athlete. You put them on the exact same program, one may heal faster than the other, right? And the professional athlete may heal slower than the other athlete, right? Because there may be some other factors that we don't know about, right? Maybe this guy's a slow healer, maybe his healing rates aren't that great. Just all these different contextual factors to consider with what happens throughout the rehab process and just with what happens within the body. I mean, like, if we knew all the answers to the human body, we would have found a cure for cancer by now.
Yeah, there's a cure for cancer. There is. The medical industry is, or the pharmaceutical industry is controlling that.
Oh yeah,
that cure.
Oh yeah, that's
money,
dude. That's why, and you know what? In all honesty, that's why physical therapy isn't a bigger thing for musculoskeletal pain. Because what happens if people stop going to doctors before going to physical therapists, right?
Right, and you say it right. It's right on the spot. You go see a doctor before you go see the dude to make you feel better.
And it really, it kind of gives you a perspective. Like, we know the healthcare system is messed up.
You want surgery? You still have to go see the guy after, but
yeah,
come do surgery with me first.
Yeah, right? And in addition to that, I mean, there are also some different clinical prediction rules and like some guidelines based off of evidence to help us determine, is surgery worth it or is PT worth it, right? Sometimes people, they choose not to go to surgery even though it is the better option because they don't want to go through surgery. Sometimes they can't afford it, right?
Yeah, that's why I liked when the doctor that assessed my shoulder, he goes, well, if you want it to look nice, you get surgery. Other than that, just go see a physical therapist.
Mhm.
It's like, all right.
Yeah. The one thing that drives me nuts about like some of the stories I hear from patients, I haven't heard it in a while, I guess, because I don't get a lot of these patients, is when you get heavy lifters, and then when doctors are just like, oh, you need to stop lifting. That's going to be the only thing that's going to help you. No, you just need to stop lifting. Right. And it's like, it's just so, sometimes when they give that advice, it's so out of context, right? It's like, if I walk in, I'm a patient, right? And I say, oh, my knee hurts when I'm squatting heavy and all this other stuff. Like, oh yeah, just stop squatting heavy and your knee will be fine. I'm like, no. You're missing the point. I want to squat heavy, and I'm trying to squat heavy, and my knee hurts, and I need something done about that. And the doctor is like, oh yeah, we can't really do anything about that. There's nothing funky on your x-rays. Like, okay, you should go see a physical therapist. Why the hell did I go to a doctor in the first place?
Yeah.
Why? Right? And so it just
you're making a good argument for physical therapists.
Yeah. And it's like, no, but at the same time, like, and I've seen another paper.
I'll get a water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen, oh yes, please. Yeah. And I've seen other papers that actually, the reason why, and I'm kind of okay with the status of where it is now, and not vouching for more physical therapists or for more physical therapy, like in the context of absolutely it's going to be the thing to be the thing that can help you, and it needs to happen right now, is because practice is so variable. Like, in terms of, like, they were looking at they were conducting surveys and different studies about clinician behaviors and whether they follow certain clinical practice guidelines, right? Or whether they stay up to date with evidence-based practice and different things. And there's too much variability. Some people, they just don't read the clinical practice guidelines. They're just okay with where they're at, right? But it's no different from other professions, where sometimes you get doctors that do like out-of-date things, or you get like architects or contractors that do like things that aren't safe anymore or not as efficient, right? Like, it's just a part of it, right? But from what I read from some studies is that there's just too much variability in how everybody is practicing PT, which is why, like, right now there's a huge push for like education reform across, the United States, which is why, like, now every program is a DPT program. That was one of the goals set by our governing body, right? And so now they're going to have new goals and new initiatives. One of them is to kind of like create a standard of practice, right? Like, because we have guidelines, but does everyone adhere to those guidelines, right? How does it become, what happens? How do we regulate it, right? And what does that mean for people who have, been practicing for 30, 40 years? All of a sudden, they have to change the way that they're practicing, right? So there's a lot of different ethical issues when it comes into that, topic. But I mean, physical therapy is a great thing if you get a great physical therapist, similar to how being a doctor, or what's that called? Seeing your doctor and having a primary physician can be a good thing if you have a good primary care physician. So yeah, I think physical therapy should be something that is more regularly
recommended.
Yeah, because, think about it, right? Someone wants to exercise, right? So they start exercising. They have knee pain. They're scared of exercising. They stop exercising. Then they develop high blood pressure, right? Then they develop diabetes. Eating goes to shit, right? They become obese, and then we have a whole other cascade of just like different medical shit to deal with. And it's just like, man, if you just got your knee checked, right? If they could just have easily said, oh, I should just go check my physical therapist, right? Yeah. Because sometimes it's just like, if you don't know your body and if you feel something funky is going on, then you may not want to do it. I work with a lot of individuals, and they're just like, oh, I feel pain. I was like, is it pain or is it muscle working? They don't know the difference.
Yeah.
And so
I'm sure most wouldn't. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it's like, why is this information like sometimes so new to people? You know what I mean? It's their bodies, like, and I get that, not everyone can know everything, right? And these things aren't more regularly how do I put this, promoted. But I just kind of look at it and I'm just like, man, if health and wellness is really that big of a is really that important to, like, the community and just people, I feel like knowing your physical therapist would be extremely important, because, like, if you get hurt, doctor's probably going to recommend you to the physical therapist. I don't get why they just don't see why we just don't see them in the first place, right? Because we can skip the barriers, we can skip the line, skip that 1 hour wait, skip that co-payment, right? Just get straight into it.
Well, it's like you said, it's the mindset. It's what people are used to, right? Something's wrong, you go to the doctor. Right? Physical therapy is something that come across as something that you should do just in the last 10, 20 years. I don't know. I've never delved into that world, but that's what I think, because even at then I've known friends that have gone to physical therapy, but they never really took it seriously, right? But now it's something that's like, fuck, I really need this. You know, this is the only way that this is the only thing that makes me feel better. I have a friend like, oh man, my shoulder's been hurting. I got to go back to get it rehabbed, right?
Yeah. Hey, similar situation. Doctor said your blood pressure is getting high. Your blood sugar is getting high, right? They just say, oh yeah, watch your blood sugar. Oh yeah, watch your blood pressure, right? But how serious how often do those serious conversations happen? You know, like, and that's where, like, so when it comes to especially going to my other pillar, like, you know, education, right? You can't educate someone until you find out what they know.
Well, it helps that you have more time with them too,
yeah,
right?
that I would say that helps. I try to give an hour for whenever I meet new patients, and then, you know, of course, sometimes doctors, they only get like 20 minutes vitals,
5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes, and then, you know, and then also here too, sometimes I feel bad cutting off people, but everyone wants to give you their life story. So, you know, sometimes
that's Guam style, man.
Yeah, that's Guam style. So, you know, like, sometimes, like, you know, the extra time is nice, but at the same time, it's just like they're gonna use that whole extra time to tell you, like, you know, because when I was young, I used to do all these things, and now it hurts. And you're just like, okay, good, but what let's talk about right now. Oh, you know, I can't do this, but back in the day.
Do you get a lot of older patients?
I do. I specifically see like a lot of veterans. Most of them are middle age. We don't see too many older patients, but we get a decent amount every now and then. I don't know why, but I really connect with all the older Chamorros. Yeah. Dude, they're so fun. Like, yeah, what's going on? Like, oh, dude, this hurts. I'm like, okay. What makes it worse? What makes it better? Like, dude, this and then this, and they're just sometimes they're straight to the point. Other times, someone will come in, they're just like, oh, okay, so what brings you in today? Like, okay, so referrals for the back. So I had heart surgery. And so
about 25 years ago.
Exactly. So, you know, there's certain things like that where I'm just like looking at it, I'm just kind of like, how much does that play in their role? And I'm just like, I can't cut them off. I gotta hear them, and I gotta listen through, because sometimes you just miss something. But it's like, I really enjoy working with people. I enjoy hearing their stories. My favorite is when they're like, I know your grandpa. Yeah. So that's always my fun one when I work with all the older patients, because they always ask, like, you know, who's your mom? What village are you from? Yeah. Those
something that you won't
fun.
Get out in the States, right?
Exactly. And I feel like, dude, like, I got a lot of friends. I have one friend who already moved back right after graduating. I have some other friends where they want to stay out there because they like the States. Other people are like, no, I want to work out there. Man, I was talking with a buddy over this weekend, and he's just like, he's like, I want to give back. I want to do this. I want to do that. Like, oh, hey, man, these ideas are great. Here's some things to think about. When do you plan on moving back? And he's like, oh, I'm actually going to stay out here. I'm going to build something on my own, but I want to give back. And I'm just like, he's saying that, but I'm listening. I'm like, I like that you like to give back. Yeah. And I'm just like,
the thought is great.
Yeah, the thought is
but
great.
You have to actually be here.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And sometimes I talk with friends, and they, like other friends who are healthcare professionals, and they're talking about, like, oh, I got all these ideas. We'll do this and we'll do that. And I was the same way. So I can respect how, you know, that mindset. So I'm not against it. I appreciate where they're coming from, right? And so I listen to them, and then my first thing I always tell them, like, come back and treat. Yeah, come back and treat for a while first, because I'm like, you know, it's like everybody wants to, you know, give back and build, right, every time they leave. But I don't think they understand how different our societal structure is, like, relative to the States, where it's just like, just little nuances, you know what I mean? And it's like, out in the States, like, because there are such large corporations, everything is, you know, relatively merit-based, right? But I'll tell you what, when it comes to, like, you know, being in here versus being out in the States, the same principles apply. They're not going to go with who has the best merit. They're going to go with who they trust and who is dependable.
Right.
And so I appreciate, like, you know, when people say they want to move back and they want to build all these things, but I don't believe it until they actually come back and they see all the barriers that we're currently facing right now. You know what I mean? Like, they have all, like, my friend that I was talking with over this weekend says, I have all this idea. I want to do this. I want to do that. Like, okay, are you even aware of what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, for example, so to add some context to it, he was talking about, like, a movement screen or a movement injury or, like, movement standards. Like, I'm trying to create it so that way we can help predict injury risk and, like, you know, minimize injuries and do all this stuff. I'm like, okay, that's nice. You know, it really helped all these, like, I didn't say this to him, but, like, I was thinking about it. So, you know, so if he hears this, like, I hope he knows I'm talking about it.
I was just going to say, well, now he's hearing it.
No, well, he's going to hear it at some point, and I would have this conversation with him. I was like, if you talk with, we had this discussion at one of the medical team meetings for GNOC, and they were saying, like, oh, well, why do kids get injured when they try to go and come out for sport, or why do they join sport? And, like, most times they're joining sports just to get in shape rather than getting in shape to do sport. And so, you know, we start talking about, like, okay, well, we need this movement standard, this movement screen. If we apply this to everyone, then yeah, we're going to keep everyone safe. And I'm just like, that don't mean shit if they come to the season out of shape. Mm-hmm. And that's what I always tell people is like, you can do anything you want, but I'm like, fitness is not going to lie. If you are not fit, you are going to suffer. Mm-hmm. And you know what I really notice here is, like, when I take a look at the star athletes versus the average or subpar athletes, they don't do anything special in terms of skill. They're honestly just more fitter than everyone else. And that's the same thing in high school.
More disciplined.
Yeah, more discipline in it. But, you know, not gonna lie, sometimes people have a better genetics than other people. Mm-hmm. I was working with one high school runner who would run 7 miles to train with me in the morning, and he would go and deadlift like 5 sets of 5 at 275 and then run 7 miles back home. And I just look at that and they're like, oh man, he must really train for that. Like, nah, that kid's a freak, dude. I'm like, that's all genetics. Like, you can't build that. That's genetics and mindset. Like, you could train all you want. You're not going to get that.
It's like that photo of The Rock where he looks like a grown-ass man at 15 years old.
Yeah, you're just like, how do I get like that? Like, gotta have babies with him. It's the only way.
Or his dad.
Yeah, or his dad. Like, how do you get like that? You gotta have babies with him. You need him in you. I'm like, that's the only way. Dude, because sometimes genetics play a role, dude.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Huge role.
Yeah, exactly.
Huge role. There's literal specimens that are walking this earth right now.
Yeah,
they're all playing sports.
Yeah, and that's why, like,
they're all the top in their game, right?
Yeah. Except Tom Brady. I don't know what happened with him. That guy, that's skill. When you talk about, like, so I've kind of like
you're going against your own argument here.
Well, and so it depends, because, like, so when I think of athletic performance, you have 3 separate domains, right? And this is a model that I've been working on, but hasn't been necessarily proven, but this is my theory. So there is a base to athletic performance. So the base is an acronym for 4 separate things. So biomechanics, athleticism, and skill, right? So biomechanics are certain physical characteristics that influence how you express force. So meaning that, like, taller people will probably have a lot of longer levers, right? So can generate more force and, you know, are advantage for things like height-based sports like basketball compared to shorter athletes. Additionally, shorter athletes have a better advantage at things like Olympic weightlifting and wrestling, because they have shorter leverage arms. So they're able to get to the ground faster. So that puts them at advantages, right? That is one thing that plays a factor in athletic performance. After that, there's athleticism. So there's your physical qualities, which I base off of what's known as Vermeil's hierarchy of athleticism. So you have specific athletic qualities. So you have work capacity, right? Your ability to just handle work, go out and grind, right? Because to make it to the NBA, I don't care how good you are, you have to be able to handle an 82-game season. Same thing with baseball. I don't care how good of a pitcher you are, you have to be able to pitch for so many games before you can even enter the conversation of sustaining that, right? And then you have your strength, right? Max level strength is a huge predictor of injury, not in the sense that if you're strong, you'll never get injured, but if you're strong, you could probably handle a lot more loads better than other people, right? And then you have explosiveness, which is, you know, power. You're strong, but can you move heavy stuff really fast, right? These are like your baseball players, your rugby players, very explosive. And then you have reactive strength, which is your bounce. So these are like your jumpers, your sprinters, your basketball players, right? And you can have good qualities in like some of these different areas, but not in everything else, right? Like you could be weak, but have good reactive strength, right? So it's kind of tricky there. But then you have your speed, right? Like how fast are you, either going in whatever direction. So there are just certain physical characteristics that influence your performance, right? And then you have skill. Are you smart, right? Do you know the game? Are you able to manipulate certain variables within the context of your sport that will lead to successful trials in the task, right? So when we have all these three different things, right? Biomechanics, athleticism, skill, then we consider everything else. You consider genetics, you consider nutrition, you consider recovery habits, you consider support systems, right? Psychological health, emotional health, right? Social skills, especially in team sports, except golf and tennis. I don't think you need friends in that. Golf, tennis, and running, you don't need friends in that. But individual-based sports. But so you have these three different things that, you know, make up athletic performance. And there is no one dominant factor between the main three, biomechanics, athleticism, and skill, that is, oh, if you have this, you're absolutely going to make it. So I'll give you some examples. You have a guy like Stephen Curry. Stephen Curry is a very skilled player. He's not the most athletic player, but he is athletic enough to survive in the NBA, right?
Right.
He may not have the best biomechanics, right? But he's always at a biomechanical advantage at his strength. So things like being able to beat people to the ball because he's shorter, right? Being a little bit quicker, able to turn the corner quicker, change directions better because he's got a lower center of gravity, right? Those are some things that put him in a biomechanical advantage, right? So that's someone who relies mostly on his skill for his athletic performance, right? Then you have a guy like LeBron James, who's 6'9", big as shit, athletic as shit, right?
And remembers plays.
He's skilled as shit, right? That's your perfect athlete, right? He's all of that. And then you may get some guys like, I'm trying to think of another one.
Glenn Davis.
Yeah. Well, oh my God, Glenn Davis. That was it. Oh man, if I were to break him down, what made him good? Definitely biomechanics. No one could get around him. That dude was big. He could box out people. They have to take a road trip to get around him. Yeah, so he was big, right? But he was athletic enough, strong enough to do his role, right? Skill, like decent enough, right? Yeah. So you have these different factors that influence that athletic performance. But keep in mind that successful athletic performance, with the exception of athletics, right, which is solely based off of, you know, your athletic performance, right? There are all these different components that will influence an individual's success. So like for Tom Brady, he's someone who's extremely skilled, right? But he had the worst combine score. He's not exactly the tallest. He doesn't look like a good freaking specimen, but his skill was just so overwhelming that his athletic performance exceeded everyone.
Right.
You know what I mean? So you have just these different factors where it comes to being quote unquote successful in a sport. And then like for myself, I'm basing most of my buckets, right, into developing an individual's athletic qualities, because I've taken a hard look at, like, you know, the current situation of Guam revolving sports. I think we have a lot of sports clubs. I think that's great. And we have so many different basketball clubs, like rugby's growing, right? Tennis academies have grown. Soccer clubs have always been growing as well. GFA is building that new facility down south as well, right? So that's expanding. That is great. We are building up opportunity for sports, right? And then, so there's an opportunity for skill to be learned everywhere. It's an opportunity for skill to be learned. Biomechanics, that's tricky. Everyone's got different biomechanics. In terms of that, I think the biomechanics just needs to be successful they just need to be successful enough with what they got, right? And that's not talking about like, how would I put this? Like their form or technique or anything. I'm talking more about like, that's just something we don't have control over. We don't have control over how tall they're going to be, right? Well, we could, but we don't want to. I don't want to dive into that.
Start diving into that stuff.
Yeah, But so, those are things that we can't really control. We can't control how tall the athlete's going to be. We can't control possibly things like, their diet so that they don't get too heavy, right? Or that they make sure that they pack on enough meat, right? But like what I really look at it is athleticism. Like high schools don't have strength and conditioning coaches here, right? High schools don't have regular periodized training programs. Like half the time kids are bouncing around from one sport to the other, right? Because they're all multi-sport athletes without giving respect to actually reconditioning themselves for that competition, right? So for example, back in the day when they had girls volleyball going into girls basketball, you had a lot of injuries with girls going from girls volleyball to girls basketball. Like, of course you do, because you put them through a 12-week season of girls volleyball, right? Or you put them through a 12-week season of volleyball where I'm sure there's...
And their body's not trained to make the basketball movement.
Exactly.
Right?
So their body's not trained to make the basketball movement, but also there's that exhaustion phase following that period of training, right? So there's a couple things that happen. They're not afforded the opportunity to actually recover from the bouts of training in a previous sport. And additionally, they're not, like we talked about before, being exposed to the specific demands of their next sport, right? Their time is not being given to those individuals, right? And so what does that mean? Does that mean we have to change the whole sports system? No. It's worked before. Other individuals have adapted to it, right? We just need to create an environment and create situations for these individuals to be able to handle and adapt to those situations, right? So that's where things like having a strength and conditioning coach within every single school would be a good one. So
I think soccer might be the only sport where most people that play soccer only play soccer. I take that back. A lot of them transition to rugby too, but for the most part, you see a lot of soccer players, when they play, that's all they literally play. Maybe that's how GFA has been, or the soccer community has been able to become successful on Guam, and they've trained these kids, right, from they were 4 years old, 5 years old, all the way till they became high school, and then now they have the national teams under 15, under 17, under 21, right, to the men's league, right, and so their body is conditioned to exert themselves at every single level. Well,
yeah, and so it gets a little tricky when we think about the youth level, in the sense that there's been some studies showing that individuals who specialize in sports at a younger age, right, may be more susceptible to things like burnout and injuries, just because that's all that they're doing, and there's a lack of variability in their exposure, right? Especially at a young age, right? They need to be exposed to many different things. But I think why soccer has been so successful isn't necessarily because they're specializing, but because there's always an opportunity. There's always training. There's always something going on, and
that's very true. Yeah.
And so what I see, and why soccer has been so successful, is because Guam Football Association has been so successful because there's always opportunities for kids to train, right? But in addition,
join a league,
but in addition to that, there are league standards. If you want to coach in the soccer federation and you want to coach in a GFA league, you have to be licensed as a coach, right? Or something like that, But
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, but
our coach back in the day was a player coach. Well, we played D2 social club, or we were like a social club.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure what maybe at the national level you have to have a coaching certificate, some sort of certification, right?
But the thing is that FIFA has a standardized coaching certification program, right? Just like most other sport coaches do, right? But look at what GFA has done in the past, just in this year. Look at how many coaches they've had certified. Look at how many offerings they've had, right? Like from FIFA to educate the coaches on what to develop, right? That's what's lacking here. There's no standard. There's no standard from what I know in other sports. I can say for certain in basketball, there was at a point in time there was a certain standard that was created at the time, but since then, and since I think when I was growing up, the people involved in youth basketball, they filter out like with time, right? They switch out. But back then there was a certain standard and expectations. It was like, okay, if you're 8 years old, these are the skills you need to develop before you go into the next age bracket, right? If you are in this age, you need to make sure that you have these skills before you go into the next bracket, right?
Yeah, and confirm that with who was Dom Saplan came on He's talking about the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so we don't have a standard, right? And so that's what makes it so challenging, is because you're developing athletes, but you don't set a standard. Meanwhile, GFA has developed a standard, but also has opened up opportunities for kids to train regularly, right? And so what happens during the summertime? Kids go and they'll play 20 different basketball games, maybe on like 1 to 3 different teams, right? They spend time getting stronger. Do they spend time getting to know their body? Did they spend time actually, developing a specific skill set, right? And so there are windows of opportunity for growth, right, and development that I just think aren't being capitalized on. And so that's where it's like, what's the biggest difference? Like, so what I want to do is I want to introduce the concept of strength and conditioning at a much younger age. I'm working with I work with one pair of sisters. Man, these girls are strong. Like, one of them is like 95 pounds and she's hang cleaning 65 pounds and she's like just a freshman in high school. And like her sister, who's younger than her, like she just started playing tennis, right? She's always been coordinated, but like I'm watching her swing a tennis racket and I just keep thinking about all the med ball throws we would do and all the different rotational work. And I'm just like, dude, she looks solid. Like, she's fresh, but she's solid. And it's like, did she ever play tennis before? No. Did she do a lot of things before? Actually, no. Like, her mom has to make her.
But you're building on those mechanics.
Exactly. I'm just building on specific things, right?
Yeah.
Can you crossover run? Can you shuffle? Can you throw? Can you jump? Can you squat? Can you lunge? Can you do XYZ? And I'm just like, I ain't trying to build no muscle. Can you do it? Yeah. The way I see it is resistance training or strength training in youth is basically coordination training. Coordination training, and then all the weights is like, oh, hold this. Now you're slightly heavier in this spot as opposed to being perfectly balanced. And you just got a little bit of extra load to do it. It's like, okay, well, now let's say you don't have weights. Okay, hold your hands over your head. Now do a lunge. Oh, a lot harder for you to keep your balance, right? Okay, good. Let's practice that. Learn how to be coordinated. And so, these are things that I didn't necessarily get as a kid. And I know that because my mother and my girlfriend will attest to this. I was an awful dancer growing up. Like, I could not dance. I did not know how to move my hips. And I started working out and I started lifting and I learned how to move my body, right? And then, like, I was making some TikToks with my fiance, and then I was dancing and everyone's like, hey, wow, you did such a good job with Jordan. Look at him. Even all my friends were just like, damn Ashley, like, what'd you do? How'd you get JT to do that? You couldn't do that before. You know what I mean? And it's like, it was nothing special. I just, kind of got a little stronger, right? I learned how to move my body, right? And it's like, I just became more aware. And if you're not exposed to those things, at a younger age, right? Like, then, it gets a little bit harder to learn. Like just think about anybody who's athletic. LeBron and Shaq, those two have had a dance-off battle at the All-Star game, right? Mm. So you think about, like, athletic capability and certain movement qualities and coordination, right? There's some type of correlation between them. So, it would make sense that these are introduced to kids at a younger age to set them up for success in the future.
Right. Yeah, man. I like how you really tie different things in, right? And make it more relative and understandable, right? Rather than being at this super scientific level, you kind of, for the lack of a better word, dumb it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, like, that's the most important thing. What good is all this information if I can't make it if I can't translate it or make it meaningful to you?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's like
we had to Google didactable.
Yeah.
What was it? Didactic.
Yeah. Hey, man, just remember, they had to translate the Bible from Latin to English.
Yeah.
So
sure. Cool, man. How long have we been going? I have something going on. Mm-hmm. And I just don't want to miss it. Mm-hmm. I'm doing all this. This what? Say that?
2 hours and 10 minutes.
What?
Dude, that did not feel like 2 hours.
No, not at all. Not at all. That was great.
Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I'm sure everything that's been said on this podcast, mm-hmm. man, you're a really intelligent guy. I can just tell. And the information that you want to share, you mm-hmm. freely want to share it, and there's no holding back in mm-hmm. the knowledge that you know. And mm-hmm. damn, dude, thanks for coming on. And I know we had planned this like mm-hmm. in October last year, right?
Good,
October,
brother.
November.
Hey, man, it happens. It happens
like,
one way or another.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to hit you back up.
Yeah.
4 months later.
Yeah. Hey, I told you, bro. The universe, whatever powers they may be, it balances it out, dog.
Yeah, man.
It works out.
Yeah, this was great. This is great. I knew I was going to learn something, but I didn't think I was going to learn this much.
Oh, I appreciate that, man.
Yeah,
There's no secrets with me, dog. There's no secrets. Take what you can and do with it what you will, dog.
Yeah. One last thing, and if we go a little bit over, it's fine. What is your plan now that you're the trainer for the basketball team, right? Is it more of a player specific focus, or are you going with an overall plan?
Well, I have an overall idea of what I want to do. One of my initiatives is to really, in all honesty, just get a regular strength and conditioning program going. That's in the future, right? Right now, my main focus is to make sure that these guys are prepared for the FIBA Asia Cup coming up. So you're
breaking them down individually.
Yeah, so I'm breaking them down individually, especially with the ones that have the luxury to, be able to attend extra training sessions, right? For sure. There are some individuals where, they have lives, and I respect that, so I don't hold them necessarily accountable for not training, right? So long as they're going to, be ready to play, right? But my main thing that I want to do is I want to really just build up from the youth into feeder programs for the men, right? So really just make sure that the youth are capitalizing on the opportunities, right, that I didn't necessarily take advantage of, or that others didn't take advantage of or have the opportunity to. So like, getting stronger, getting bigger, getting faster at a younger age, and exposing them to that type of training. So then that way, when they get there, it's not a surprise. Right. You know what I mean? Right. And that's my ultimate goal. I don't want to stick with just basketball. My whole goal, like my ultimate goal, is to somehow, some way get a strength and conditioning coach in every single high school, right? Some type of, standardized program for fitness training in, middle school, and just kind of like raise awareness for different coaches of different sports, just saying like, okay, this is your role with these athletes, right? Understand it, and these are some key considerations that you need to have moving forward. So my goal is to just build up sports across the island. I want to see us dominate Pacific Games again, man.
There would have to be an integration between schools and clubs and stuff like that, with the general understanding of how any sport is played, and that there's no hard feelings when someone plays with an opponent outside of school, right? Or anything like that.
Oh, that's just old school. That just grinds my gears. I'm just like, when I hear that, I'm like, why would you care about that? Like, we're so freaking small.
But do people care about that, right? That is an issue.
Yeah. Some people do. From what I understand, it's in small pockets, right? But for the most part, if it's like, if people really care about the kids, they're going to do what's best for the kids. And if that means that the kid has to go train with someone better or play with someone better for them to get them that opportunity that they need, it's not about you as a coach.
Sometimes it is.
I know. That just drives me nuts. That's a whole other bag of worms. You're trying to.
Let's save it for next time, man. Man. Thank you so much, dude. Thank you for doing this. And COVID, the handshake is always good. Yeah. And let's do it. Yeah, let's do it again.
Part two to come, Doc. Part 2 to come.
You got me lost for words, man. Before we end, promote whatever you got going.
So my name is Jordan Tingson. Like, I'm a physical therapist at SOAR Physical Therapy. I'm also a strength and conditioning coach. I work primarily with private clients and our men's national team. I'm for all sports. So if you're not doing a sport, I highly encourage individuals to go out and try one. I don't care if you never played a sport before. I don't care if you're 5 or if you're 50. Go out, do something, have fun. Get fit, get well. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Jordan Tingson, right? That's how you think. How do people actually pronounce it?
There were so many Jordans growing up. I responded to so many different names: JT, TJ, Jor, Jay, Tingson. I just kind of said, okay, they're talking. Yeah.
Well, I like addressing people by their full name. So
Jordan Tingson.
Jordan Tingson.
Yes.
On the podcast. until next time.
Dude,
Thank you, brother.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll do this again.
All
Thank
right.
you so much. Maddie, are we going to do it this time or are we going to save it for next one?
I think we'll save it.
Okay. All right. Until next time. Peace.
All right.
Out.
Peace.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast with Dr. Jordan Tingson. Smart guy, right? I wasn't lying. Go and listen to the Master Random Journals. I'm going to be dropping way more episodes of the journals just for your listening pleasure. And if you got the time, go and rate and review the podcast on the Apple Podcast app. Listen to the podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. It's everywhere. Everywhere you can listen to podcasts, that's where you'll find the Master Random Podcast. And once the studio's all set up, you know I'm going to be bringing more people over. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of everyone around you, and nothing but love.